Raja Yoga by Swami Vivekananda. This work is in the public domain. This is a private recording done by Mystic Chimes. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest the divine within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas, or rituals or books, or temples or forms are but secondary details. The Preface. Since the dawn of history, various extraordinary phenomena have been recorded as happening amongst human beings. Witnesses are not wanting in modern times to attest the fact of such events. Even in societies living under the full blaze of modern science, the vast mass of such evidence is unreliable, as coming from ignorant, superstitious, or fraudulent persons. In many instances, the so-called miracles are imitations. But what do they imitate? It is not the sign of a candid and scientific mind to throw overboard anything without proper investigation. Surface scientists, unable to explain the various extraordinary mental phenomena, strive to ignore their very existence. They are therefore more culpable than those who think that their prayers are answered by a being or beings above the clouds, or than those who believe that their petitions will make such beings change the course of the universe. The latter have the excuse of ignorance, or at least of a false system of education in their childhood, which has taught them to depend upon such beings for help. And this dependence has now become a part of their degenerate nature. The former have no such excuse. For thousands of years, such phenomena have been investigated, studied, and generalized. The whole ground of the religious faculty of man has been analyzed, and the practical result is the science of Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga does not, after the unpardonable manner of some modern scientists, deny the existence of facts, which are very difficult to explain. On the other hand, it gently, yet in no uncertain terms, tells the superstitious that miracles and answers to prayers and powers of faith, though true as facts, are not rendered comprehensible through the superstitious explanations of attributing them to the agency of being or beings above the clouds. It declares to mankind that each being is only a conduit for the infinite knowledge of power that lies behind. It teaches that desires and wants are in man, that the power of supply is also in man, and that wherever and whenever a desire, a want, a prayer has been fulfilled, it was out of this infinite magazine that the supply came, and not from any supernatural being. The idea of supernatural beings may rouse to a certain extent the power of action in man, but it also brings spiritual decay. It brings dependence. It brings fear. It brings superstition. It degenerates into a horrible belief in the natural weakness of man. There is no supernatural, says the yogi, but there are in nature gross manifestations and subtle manifestations. The subtle are the causes, the gross the effects. The gross can be easily perceived by the senses, not so the subtle. The practice of Raja Yoga will lead to the acquisition of the more subtle perceptions. All the orthodox systems of Indian philosophy have one goal in view: the liberation of the soul through perfection. The method is by yoga. The word yoga covers an immense ground, but both the Sankhya and Vedanta schools point to yoga in some form or another. The subject of the first lectures in the present book is that form of yoga. The aphorisms of Patanjali are the highest authority and textbook on Raja Yoga. The other philosophers, though occasionally differing from Patanjali in some philosophical aspect, have as a rule acceded to his method of practice and decided consent. The first part of this book is comprised of several lectures. The class is delivered by the present writer in New York. The second part is a rather free translation of the aphorisms of Patanjali with a running commentary. Effort has been made to avoid technicalities as far as possible and to keep the free and easy style of conversation. In the first part, some simple and specific directions are given for the student who wants to practice, but all such are especially and earnestly reminded that, with few exceptions, yoga can only be safely learned by direct contact with the teacher. If these conversations succeed in awakening a desire for further information on the subject, the teacher will not be wanting. The system of Patanjali is based upon the system of the Sankhya's, the points of difference being very few. The two most important differences are: first, that Patanjali admits a personal God in the form of a first teacher, while the only God the Sankhya's admit is a nearly perfected being, temporally in charge of a cycle. Second, the yogis hold the mind to be equally all-pervading with the soul, or Purusa, and the Sankhya's do not. Raja Yoga, or conquering the internal nature. Chapter 1. Introductory. All our knowledge is based upon experience, what we call inferential knowledge, in which we go from the less general to the more general, or from the general to the particular, has experience as its basis. In what are called the exact sciences, people easily find the truth because it appeals to the particular experience of every human being. The scientist does not tell you to believe in anything, but he has certain results which come from his own experiences and reasoning on those experiences. When he asks us to believe in his conclusions, he appeals to some universal experience of humanity. In every exact science, there is a universal basis which is common to all humanity, so that we can at once see the truth of the fallacy of the conclusions drawn therefrom. Now, the question is, has religion any such basis or not? I shall have to answer the question both in the affirmative and in the negative. Religion, as it is generally taught all over the world, is said to be based on faith and belief, and in most cases consists only of different sets of theories. And this is the reason why we find all these various religions quarreling with each other. Those theories again are based on belief. One man says there is a great being sitting above the clouds and governing the whole universe, and he asks me to believe that, solely on the authority of his assertion. In the same way, I may have my own ideas, which I am asking others to believe. and if they ask a reason, I cannot supply them with any. This is why religion and metaphysical philosophy has a bad name nowadays. Every educated man seems to say, oh, these religions are only bundles of theories without any standard to judge them by. Each man preaching his own pet ideas. At the same time, I must tell you that there is a basis of universal belief in religion, governing all these different theories and all the varying ideas of different sects of men in different countries. Going to the basis of them, we find that they are also based upon universal experiences. In the first place, I will ask you to analyze all the various religions of the world. You will find that these are divided into two classes, those with a book and those without a book. Those with a book are the strongest and have the largest number of followers. Those without books have mostly died out, and the few new ones have very small followings. Yet in all of them, we find one consensus of opinion, that the truths they teach are the results of the experiences of particular persons. The Christians ask you to believe in his religion, to believe in Christ, and to believe in him as the incarnation of God, to believe in God in a soul and in a better state of the soul. If I ask him for reasons, he says, no, it is my belief. But if you go to the fountainhead of Christianity, you will find that it is based upon experience. Christ said he saw God. The disciples said that they felt God, and so forth. Similarly, in Buddhism, it is Buddha's experience. He experienced certain truths, saw them, came in contact with them, and preached them to the world. So with the Hindus, in their books, the writers, who are called rishis or sages, declared that they have experienced certain truths, and these they preach. Thus it is clear that all the religions of the world have been built upon one universal and adamantine foundation of all our knowledge, direct experience. The teachers all saw God. They all saw their own souls. They saw their eternity. They saw their future. And they saw what they preached. Only there is this difference, that in most of these religions, especially in modern times, a peculiar claim is put before us. And that claim is that these experiences are impossible at the present day. They were only possible with the few men who were the first founders of the religions that subsequently bore their names. At the present time, these experiences have become obsolete, and therefore we have now to take religion on belief. This I entirely deny. If there has been one case of experience in this world, in any particular branch of knowledge, it absolutely follows that this experience has been possible millions of times before and will be repeated eternally. Uniformity is a rigorous law of nature. What once happened can happen always. The teachers of the science of yoga, therefore, declare that religion is not only based upon the experiences of ancient times, but that no man can be religious until he has had the same perceptions himself. Yoga is the science which teaches us to get these perceptions. It is useless to talk about religion until one has felt it. Why is there so much disturbance, so much fighting and quarreling in the name of God? There has been more bloodshed in the name of God than for any other cause, and the reason is that people never went to the fountainhead. They were content only to give a mental assent to the customs of their forefathers, and wanted others to do the same. What right has a man to say he has a soul if he does not feel it? Or that there is a God if he does not see him? If there is a God, we must see him. If there is a soul, we must perceive it. Otherwise, it is better not to believe. It is better to be an outspoken atheist than a hypocrite. The modern idea, on the other hand, with the learned, is that religion and metaphysics and all search of a supreme being is futile. On the other hand, with the semi-educated, the idea seems to be that these things really have no basis, that their only value consists in the fact that there are strong motive powers for doing good to the world. If men believe in God, they may become good and moral, and so make good citizens. We cannot blame them for holding such ideas, seeing that all these teachings these men get is simply to believe in an eternal rigmarole of words without any substance behind them. They are asked to live upon words. Can they do it? If they could, I should not have the least regard for human nature. Man wants truth, wants to experience truth for himself, to grasp it, to realize it, to feel it within his heart of hearts. Then alone, declare the Vedas, will all doubt vanish, all darkness be scattered, and all crookedness be made straight. Ye children of immortality, even those who live in the highest sphere, the way is found. There is a way out of all this darkness, and that is by perceiving Him who is beyond all darkness. And there is no other way. The science of Raja Yoga proposes to put before humanity a practical and scientifical worked out method of reaching this truth. In the first place, every science must have its own method of investigation. If you want to become an astronomer and sit down and cry, "Astronomy, astronomy," it will never come to you. The same with chemistry. A certain method must be followed. You must go to the laboratory, take the different substances, mix them up, compound them, experiment with them, and out of that will come a knowledge of chemistry. If you want to be an astronomer, you must go to the observatory, take a telescope, study the stars and planets, and then you will become an astronomer. Each science must have its own methods. I could preach you thousands of sermons, but they would not make you religious until you first practice the method. These are the truths of the sages of all countries, of all ages. Men pure and unselfish, who had no motive but to do good to the world. They all declare that they have found some truth higher than the senses can bring to us, and they challenge verification. They say to you, take up the method and practice honestly, and then if you do not find this higher truth, you will have the right to say that there is no truth in the claim. But before you have done that, you are not rational in denying the truth of these assertions. So we must work faithfully, using the prescribed methods, and light will come. In acquiring knowledge, we make use of generalization, and generalization is based upon observation. We first observe facts, and then we generalize, and then we draw our conclusions or principles. The knowledge of the mind, of the internal nature of man, can never be had until we have the power of first observing the facts that are going on within. It is very easy to observe facts in the external world, and many thousands of instruments have been invented to observe every point of nature. But in the internal world, we find no instrument to help us. Yet we know we must observe in order to have a real science. Without a proper analysis, any science will be hopeless, mere theorizing, and that is why all the psychologists have been quarreling among themselves since the beginning of time, except those few who found the means of observation. The science of Raja Yoga, in the first place, proposes to give men such a means of observing the internal states, and the instrument is the mind itself, the power of attention of mind. when properly guided and directed toward the internal world, will analyze the mind and illumine facts for us. The power of the mind are like rays of light being dissipated. When they are concentrated, they illume everything. This is the only source of knowledge that we have. Everyone is using it, both in the external and the internal world. But for the psychologist, the minute observation which the scientific man can throw upon the external world will have to be thrown on the internal world, and this requires a great deal of practice. From our childhood upwards, we have been taught only to pay attention to things external, never to pay attention to things internal, and most of us nearly lost the faculty of observing the internal mechanism. To turn the mind, as it were, inside, stop it from going outside, and then to concentrate all its powers and throw them upon the mind itself, in order that it may know its own nature, analyze itself, is very hard work. Yet that is the only way to anything which would be a scientific approach to the subject. What is the use of such knowledge? In the first place, knowledge itself is the highest reward of knowledge, and in the second place, there is also utility in it. It will take away our misery. When by analyzing his own mind, man comes face to face, as it were, with something which is never destroyed, something which is, by its own nature, eternally pure and perfect, he will no more be miserable, no more unhappy. All misery comes from fear, from unsatisfied desire. Man will find that he never dies, and then he will have no more fear of death. When he knows that he is perfect, he will have no more vain desires, and both these causes being absent, there will be no more misery. There will be perfect bliss, even while in this body. There is only one method by which to attain this knowledge, that which is called concentration. The chemist in his laboratory concentrates all the energies of his mind into one focus and throws them upon the materials he is analyzing, and so finds out their secret. The astronomer concentrates all the energies of his mind and projects them through his telescope upon the skies, and the stars, the sun, and the moon give up their secrets to him. The more I can concentrate my thoughts on the matter on which I am talking to you, the more light I can throw upon it. You are listening to me, and the more you concentrate your thoughts, the more clearly you will grasp what I have to say. How has all this knowledge in the world been gained but by the concentration of the powers of the mind? Nature is ready to give up her secrets if we only know how to knock, to give her the necessary blow, and the strength and force of the blow will come through concentration. There is no limit to the power of the human mind. The more concentrated it is, the more power is brought to bear on one point, and that is the secret. It is easier to concentrate the mind on external things. The mind naturally goes outwards, but in the case of religion, or psychology, or metaphysics, the subject and object are one. The object is internal. The mind itself is the object, and it is necessary to study the mind itself. Mind studying mind. We know that there is a power of the mind called reflective. I am talking to you. At the same time I am standing outside, as it were, a second person, and knowing and hearing what I am talking. You work and think at the same time. Another portion of your mind stands by and sees what you are thinking. The power of the mind should be concentrated and turned back upon itself. And as the darkest places reveal their secrets before the penetrating rays of the sun, so will this concentrated mind penetrate its own innermost secrets. Thus, we will come to the basis of belief, the real, genuine religion. We will perceive for ourselves whether we have souls, whether life is of 5 minutes or of eternity, whether there is God in the universe or none. It will be revealed to us. This is what Raja Yoga proposes to teach. The goal of all its teachings is how to concentrate the mind, then how to discover the facts in our own minds, then how to generalize those facts and form our own conclusions from them. It therefore never asks the question what our religion is, whether we are deists or atheists, whether Christians, Jews, or Buddhists. We are human beings. This is sufficient. Every human being has the right and power to seek for religion. Every human being has the right to ask the reason why and to have his questions answered by himself if he only takes the trouble. So far then, we see that in the study of this Raja Yoga, no faith or belief is necessary. Believe nothing until you find it out for yourself. That is what it teaches us. Truth requires no prop to make it stand. Do you mean to say that the facts of our awakened state require any dreams or imaginings to prove them? Certainly not. This study of Raja Yoga takes a long time and constant practice. A part of this practice is physical, but the main part of it is mental. As we go along, we shall find how intimately the mind is connected with the body. If we believe that the mind is simply a finer part of the body, and that the mind acts upon the body, in the same way, the body must act upon the mind. If the body is sick, the mind becomes sick also. If the body is healthy, the mind remains healthy and strong. When one is angry, the mind becomes disturbed. At the same time, when the mind is disturbed, the body also becomes disturbed. With the majority of mankind, the mind is entirely under the control of the body. The mind is very little developed. The vast majority of humanity, if you will kindly excuse me, is very little removed from the animals. Not only that, but in many instances, the power of control is very little higher than of the lower animals. We have very little command of our minds. Therefore, to bring that command about, to get that control over body and mind, we must take certain physical helps, and when the body is sufficiently controlled, we can attempt the manipulation of the mind. By manipulation of the mind, we shall be able to bring it under our control, make it work as we like, and compel it to concentrate its powers as we desire. According to Raja Yogi, all this external world is but the gross from the internal or subtle. The finer is always the cause, and the grosser the effect. So external world is the effect, and the internal the cause. In the same way, external forces are simply the grosser parts, of which the internal forces are the finer. One who has discovered and learned how to manipulate the internal forces will get the whole of nature under his control. The yogi proposes to himself no less a task than to master the whole universe, to control the whole of nature. He wants to arrive at the point where what we call nature's laws will have no influence over him, where he will be able to go beyond, where he will be able to get beyond them all. He will be master of the whole of nature, internal and external. The progress and civilization of the human race is simply controlling this nature. Various races differ in their processes. Just as in the same society, some individuals want to control external nature, and others want to control internal nature. So among races, Some want to control the external nature, and some the internal. Some say that by controlling internal nature, we control everything. Some that by controlling external nature, we control everything. Carried to the extreme, both are right, because there is neither internal nor external. It is a fictitious limitation that never exists. Both are defined to meet at the same point, the externalist and the internalist, when both reach the extreme of their knowledge. Just as a physician, when he pushes his knowledge to its limits, finds it melting away into metaphysics, so the metaphysician will find that what he calls mind and matter are but apparent distinctions, which we will have to vanish forever. The end and aim of all science is to find a unit, that one out of which all this manifold is being manufactured. That one exists as many. Raja Yoga proposes to start from the internal world, to study internal nature, and through that control the whole, both internal and external. It is a very old attempt. India has been its special stronghold, but it was also attempted by other nations. In Western countries, it is thought to be mysticism. People who wanted to practice it were either burned or killed as witches and sorcerers. And in India, for various reasons, it fell into the hands of persons who destroyed 90% of the knowledge, and of the portion which remained, tried to make a great secret. In modern times, many so-called teachers have arisen worse than those of India, because the latter knew something, while these modern exponents do not. Anything that is secret or mysterious in these systems of yoga should be at once rejected. The best guide in life is strength. In religion, as in everything else, discard everything that weakens you. Have nothing to do with it. All mystery mongering weakens the human brain. Through it, this science of yoga has been well nigh destroyed, but it is really one of the grandest of sciences. From the time that it was discovered, more than 4,000 years ago, it was perfectly delineated and formulated and preached in India, and it is a striking fact that the more modern the commentator, the greater the mistakes he makes. The more ancient the writer on it, the more rational he is. Thus, it fell into the hands of a few persons who made it a secret, instead of letting the full blaze of daylight and reason fall upon it, and they did so that they might have the powers to themselves. In the first place, there is no mystery in what I preach. What little I know, I will tell you. So far as I can reason it out, I will do so. But what I do not know, I will simply tell you that it is what the book says. It is wrong to blindly believe. You must exercise your own reason and judgment. You must practice and see whether things happen or not, just as you would take up any other science of a material nature. Exactly in the same manner, you must take up this science for study. There is neither mystery nor danger in it. So far as it is true, it ought to be preached in the public streets, in the broad daylight. Any attempt to mystify these things is productive of great danger. Before proceeding further, I will state to you a little of the Sakya philosophy on which the whole of Raja Yoga is based. According to the philosophy, perception comes through instruments. Example, the eyes. The eyes carry it to the organs to the mind to the determinative faculty. From this, the Purusa, or the soul, receives it, and it gives the order back, as it were, and so on through all these stages. In this way, sensations are received. With the exception of the Purusa, all of these are material, but the mind is of much finer material than the external instruments. That material of which the mind is composed becomes grosser, and becomes what is called the tanmatras. It becomes still grosser and forms the external material. So that between the intellect and the grosser matter outside, there is only a difference in degree. The purusa is the only thing which is immaterial. Mind is an instrument in the hand of the soul, as it were, through which the soul catches external objects. The mind is constantly changing and vacillating, and it can either attach itself to several organs, or to one, or to none. For instance, if I hear the clock with great attention, I will not, perhaps, see anything, although my eyes may be open, showing that the mind was not attached to the seeing organ, although it was to the hearing organ. And the mind, in the same way, can be attached to all the organs simultaneously. This mind has the reflective power of looking back into its own depths. This reflective power is what the yogi wants to attain. By concentrating the power of the mind and turning them inward, he seeks to know what is happening inside. There is in this no question of mere belief. It is the analysis of certain philosophers. Modern physiologists tell you that the eyes are not the organs of vision, but that the organs are in the nerve center in the brain, and so with all the senses. And they also tell you that these centers are formed of the same material as the brain itself. So the Sankhyas will also tell you, but one is a statement on the physical side, and the other on the psychological side, yet both are the same. Beyond this, we have to demonstrate. The yogi proposes to himself to attain to that fine state of perception in which he can perceive all these things. There must be mental perception of all different states. We shall perceive how the sensation is traveling, and how the mind is receiving it, how it is going to the demonstrative faculty, and how this gives it to the purusa. As each science requires certain preparations, the yogi proposes to himself to attain to that fine state of perception in which he can perceive all these things. There must be mental perception of all the different states. We shall perceive how the sensation is traveling, and how the mind is receiving it, how it is going to the demonstrative faculty, and how this gives it to the purusa. As each science requires certain preparations, as each science has its own method, until we follow that method, we can never understand that science. So in Raja Yoga. Certain regulations as to food are necessary. We must use that food which brings us the purest mind. If we go into a menagerie, you will find this demonstrated at once. You see the elephants, huge animals, but calm and gentle. And if you go toward the cage of the lions and tigers, you will find them restless, showing how much difference has been produced by food. All the forces that are working in this body have been produced out of food. We see that every day, if you begin to fast, first your body will get weak. The physical force will suffer. Then, after a few days, the mental force will suffer also. First, memory will fail. Then comes a point when you are not able to think, much less to pursue any course of reasoning. We must, therefore, to take care of what sort of food we eat at the beginning. And when we have got strength enough, when our practice is well advanced, we need not to be so careful in this respect. While the plant is growing, it must be hedged round, lest it be injured. But when it becomes a tree, the hedges are taken away. It is strong enough to withstand all assaults. A yogi must avoid the two extremes of luxury and austerity. He must not fast or torture his flesh. He who does so, says the Gita, cannot be a yogi. he who keeps awake, he who sleeps much, he who works too much, he who does not work. None of these can be yogis. Chapter 2. The First Steps. Raja Yoga is divided into 8 steps. The first is yama, non-killing, truthfulness, non-stealing, convenience, and non-receiving of any gifts. Next is niyama, cleanliness, contentment, mortification, study, and self-surrender to God. Then comes asana, or posture, pranayama, or controlling the vital forces of the body, pratyahara, or making the mind introspective, dharana, or concentration, dhyana, or meditation, and samadhi, or super consciousness. The yama and niyama, as we see, are moral trainings. Without these as the basis, no practice of yoga will succeed. As these practices become established, the yogi will begin to realize the fruit of his practice. Without these, it will never bear fruit. A yogi must not think of injuring anyone through thought, word, or deed, and this applies not only to man, but to all animals. Mercy shall not be for men alone, but shall go beyond and embrace the whole world. The next step is asana, posture, a series of exercises, physical and mental, is to be gone through every day until certain high states are reached. Therefore, it is quite necessary that we should find a posture in which we can remain long. That posture, which is easiest for each one, is the posture to use. For one man, it may be very easy to think in a certain posture, but this may be very difficult for another. We will find later on that in the study of these psychological matters, there will be a good deal of action going on in the body. Nerve currents will have to be displaced and given a new channel. New sorts of vibrations will begin. The whole constitutions will be remodeled, as it were. But the main part of the action will lie along the spinal column, so that the one thing necessary for the posture is to hold the spinal column free. Sitting erect, holding the 3 parts, the chest, neck, and head, in a straight line. Let the whole weight of the body be supported by the ribs, and then you have an easy natural posture. With the spine straight, you will naturally see that you cannot think very high thoughts with the chest in. This portion of yoga is a little similar to the Hatha Yoga, which deals entirely with the physical body. The aim of the latter is to make the physical body very strong. We have nothing to do with that here, because the practices are very difficult and cannot be learned in a day, and after all, do not lead to any spiritual growth. Many of these practices you will find in Delsarte and other teachers, such as placing the body in different postures, but the object in these is physical, not psychological. There is no muscle in the body over which a man cannot establish a perfect control. The heart can be made to stop or go on at its bidding, and in the same way, each part of the organism can be made to work at his bidding. The result of this part of yoga is to make men live long. Health is the chief idea, the one goal of the Hatha Yogi. He is determined not to fall sick, and he never does. He lives long. 100 years is nothing to him. He is quite young, fresh, when he is 150, without one hair turning gray. But that is all. A banyan tree lives sometimes 5,000 years, but it is a banyan tree, and nothing more. So, if a man lives long, he is only a healthy animal. 1 or 2 ordinary lessons of the Hatha Yogis are very useful. For instance, some of you will find it as a good thing for headaches to drink cold water through the nose as soon as you get up. The whole day, your brain will be nice and cool, and it will never catch cold. It is very easy to do. Put your nose into the water and make a pump action in the throat. After one has learned to have a firm erect seat, he has to perform according to certain schools, a practice called the purifying of the nerves. This part has been rejected by some as not belonging to Raja Yoga, but as so great an authority as the commentator Sankaracharya advises it, I think it fits that it should be mentioned. I will quote his own directions from his commentary to the Zetvatara Upanishad. The mind, whose dross has been cleared away by pranayama, becomes fixed in Brahman. Therefore, pranayama is pointed out. First, the nerves are to be purified. Then comes the power to practice pranayama. Stopping the right nostril with the thumb, with the left nostril fill in air, according to one's capacity. Then, without any interval, throw the air out through the right nostril, closing the left one. Again, inhaling through the right nostril, eject through the left, according to capacity. Practicing this 3 or 5 times at 4 intervals of the day, before dawn, during midday, in the evening, and at midnight. In 15 days or a month, purity of the nerves is attained. Then begins pranayama. Practice is absolutely necessary. You may sit down and listen to me by the hour every day, but if you do not practice, you will never get one step further. It all depends on practice. We never understand these things until we experience them. We will have to see and feel them for ourselves. Simply listening to the explanations and theories will not do. There are several obstructions to practice. The first obstruction is an unhealthy body. If the body is not in a fit state, the practice will be obstructed. Therefore, we have to take care of what we eat and drink and what we do. Always use a mental effort, what is usually called Christian Science, to keep the body strong. That is all. Nothing further of the body. We must not forget that health is only a means to an end. If health were the end, we would be like animals. Animals rarely become unhealthy. The second obstruction is doubt. We always feel doubtful about things we do not see. Man cannot live upon words, however he may try. So doubt comes to us as to whether there is any truth in these things or not. Even the best of us will doubt sometimes. With practice, within a few days, a little glimpse will come, enough to give you encouragement and hope. As one commentator on yoga philosophy says, when one proof is realized, however little it may be, that will give us faith in the whole teaching of yoga. For instance, after the first few months of training and teaching, you will begin to find you can read others' thoughts. They will come to you in picture form. Perhaps you will hear something at a long distance. When you concentrate your mind and try to do so, these glimpses will come just a little bit at first, but enough to give you faith and strength and hope. For instance, if you concentrate your thoughts on the tip of your nose, in a few days you will begin to smell most beautiful fragrance. And that will be enough to show you there are certain mental perceptions that can be made obvious without the contact of physical objects. But we must always remember that there are only the means. The aim and end and goal of all this training is liberation of the soul, absolute control of nature, and nothing short of it must be the goal. We must be the masters and not nature, neither body nor mind, but our master. And neither must we forget that the body is mind, and not I the body's. A god and a demon went to learn from the self from a great sage. They studied with him for a long time, and at last the sage told them, "Thou art the being thou art seeking." Both of them thought that their bodies were the self. "We have got everything," they said, and both of them returned to their people and said, "We have learned everything there is to be learned. Eat, drink, and be merry. We are the self, and there is nothing beyond us." The nature of the demon was ignorant, clouded, so he never inquired any further, but was perfectly satisfied with the idea that he was God, that by self was meant the body. But the God had a purer nature. He at first committed the mistake of thinking, "I, this body, am Brahman, so keep it strong and in health, and well dressed, and give it all sorts of bodily enjoyments." But in a few days, he found out that it could not be the meaning of the sage, their master. There must be something higher. So he came back and said, "Sir, did you teach me that the body is the self? If so, I see all bodies die. The self cannot die." The sage said, "Find it out. Thou art that." Then the god thought that the vital forces which work the body were what the sage meant. But after a time, he found that if he ate, these vital forces remained strong. But if he starved, they became weak. The god then went back to the sage and said, "Sir, did you mean that the vital forces are the self?" The sage said, "Find out for yourself. Thou art that." The god returned once more and thought that it was the mind. Perhaps that is the self. But in a few days he reflected that thoughts are so various, now good, now bad. The mind is too changeable to be the self. He went back to the sage and said, "Sir, I do not think that the mind is the self. Did you mean that?" "No," replied the sage. "Thou art that. Find out for yourself." The god went back and at last found that he was the self, beyond all thought, one without birth or death, whom the sword cannot pierce or the fire burn, whom air cannot dry or the water melt, the beginningless and birthless, the immovable, the intangible, the omniscient, the omnipotent being, and that it was neither the body nor the mind, but beyond them all. So he was satisfied, but the poor demon did not get the truth, owing to his fondness for the body. This world has a good many of these demonic natures, but there are some gods too. If one proposes to teach any science to increase the power of sense of enjoyment, he finds multitudes ready for it. If one undertakes to show mankind the supreme goal, they care nothing for it. Very few have the power to grasp the highest, fewer still the patience to attain it. But a few also know that if the body be kept for 1,000 years, the result will be the same in the end. When the forces that hold it together go away, the body must fall. No man was ever born who could stop his body one moment from changing. Body is the name of a series of changes. As in a river, the masses of water are changing before you every moment, and new masses are coming, yet taking similar form. So it is with this body. Yet the body must be kept strong and healthy. It is the best instrument we have. This human body is the greatest body in the universe, and a human being, the greatest being. Man is higher than all animals, than all angels. None is greater than man. Even the devas will have to come down again and attain to salvation through a human body. Man alone attains to perfection, not even the devas. According to the Jews and the Mohammedans, God created man, and after creating man, he asked the angels to come and salute him, and all did except Iblis. So God cursed him, and he became Satan. Behind this allegory is the great truth, that this human birth is the greatest birth we can have. The lower creation, the animal, is dull and manufactured mostly of tamas. Animals cannot have any high thoughts, nor can the angels or devas attain to direct freedom without human birth. In human society, in the same way, too much wealth or too much poverty is a great impediment to the higher development of the soul. It is from the middle classes that the great ones of the world come. Here, the forces are very equally adjusted and balanced. Returning to our subject, we come next to pranayama, controlling the breathing. What has that to do with concentrating the powers of the mind? Breath is like the flywheel of this machine. In a big engine, you find the flywheel first moving, and that motion is conveyed to finer and finer machinery until the most delicate and finest mechanism in the machine is in motion in accordance. This breath is that flywheel, supplying and regulating the motive power to everything in this body. There once was a minister to a great king. He fell into disgrace, and the king, as a punishment, ordered him to be shut up at the top of a very high tower. This was done, and the minister was left there to perish. He had a faithful wife, however, and at night she came to the tower and called to her husband at the top to know what she could do to help him. He told her to return to the tower the following night and to bring with her a long rope, a stout twine, a packed thread, a silken thread, a beetle, and a little honey. Wondering much, the good wife obeyed her husband and brought him the desired articles. The husband directed her to attach the silken thread firmly to the beetle, then to smear its horns with a drop of honey, and set him free on the wall of the tower, with his head pointing up. She obeyed all these instructions, and the beetle started on his long journey. Smelling the honey before him, he slowly crept onwards and upwards in the hope of reaching it, until at last he reaches the top of the tower. When the minister grabs the beetle and got possession of the silken thread, he told his wife to tie the other end to the packed thread, and after he had drawn up the packed thread, he repeated the procedure with the stout twine, and lastly with the rope. Then the rest was easy. The minister descended from the tower by means of the rope and made his escape. In this body of ours, the breath motion is the silken thread, and laying hold of that and learning to control it will grasp the pack thread of the nerve currents, and from these the stout twine of our thoughts, and lastly the rope of prana, controlling which we reach freedom. We do not know anything about our own bodies. We cannot know. At best, we can take a dead body and cut it in pieces, and there are some who can take a live animal and cut it in pieces in order to see what is inside the body. Still, that has nothing to do with our own bodies. We know very little about them. Why do we not? Because our attention is not discriminating enough to catch the very fine movements that are going on within. We can know of these only as the mind, as it were, enters the body and becomes more subtle. To get that subtle perception, we have to begin with the grosser perceptions. So we have to get hold of that which is setting the whole engine in motion, and that is prana, the most obvious manifestation of which is breath. Then along with the breath, we will slowly enter the body, and that will enable us to find out about the subtle forces, how the nerve currents are moving all over the body. And as soon as we perceive that and learn to feel them, we shall begin to get control over them and over the body. The mind is also set in motion by these nerve currents. So at last, we shall reach the state when we have perfect control over the body and mind, making both our servants. Knowledge is power, and we have to get this power. So we must begin at the beginning. The pranayama, restraining the prana. This pranayama is a long subject, and it will take several lessons to illustrate it thoroughly. We will take it part by part. We shall gradually see what are the reasons for each exercise and what forces in the body are set in motion. All these things will come to us, but it requires constant practice, and the proof will come by practice. No amount of reasoning which I can give you will be proof to you until you have demonstrated it for yourselves. As soon as you begin to feel these currents in motion all over you, doubts will vanish, but it requires hard practice every day. You must practice at least twice every day, and the best times are towards the morning and the evening, when night passes into day and day into night. It has to pass through a state of relative calmness. The early morning and the early evening are the 2 points of calmness. Your body will have a like tendency to be calm at those times. We will take advantage of that natural condition and begin then to practice. Make it a rule not to eat until you have practiced. If you do this, the sheer force of hunger will break your laziness. In India, they teach children never to eat until they have practiced and worshipped, and it becomes natural to them after a while. A boy will not feel hungry until he has bathed and practiced. Those of you who can afford it will do better to have a room for this practice alone. Do not sleep in that room. It must be kept holy. You must not enter the room until you have bathed and are perfectly clean in body and mind. Place flowers in that room always. They are the best surroundings for a yogi. Also, pictures that are pleasing. Burn incense morning and evening. Have no quarreling or anger or unholy thoughts in that room. Only allow those persons to enter who are of the same thought as you. Then, by and by, there will be an atmosphere of holiness in the room. And when you are miserable, sorrowful, doubtful, or your mind is disturbed, the very fact of entering that room will make you calmer. This was the idea of the temple and the church, and in some temples and churches, you will find it even now, but in the majority of them, the very idea has been lost. The idea is that by keeping holy vibrations there, the place becomes and remains illumined. Those who cannot afford to have a room set apart can practice anywhere they like. Sit in a straight posture, and the first thing to do is to send a current of holy thought to all creation. Mentally repeat, "Let all beings be happy. Let all beings be peaceful. Let all beings be blissful." So do to the east, south, north, and west. The more you do that, the better you will feel yourself. You will find at last that the easiest way to make yourselves healthy is to see that others are healthy, and the easiest way to make yourselves happy is to see that others are happy. After doing that, those who believe in God should pray, not for money, not for health, nor for heaven. Pray for knowledge and light. Every other prayer is selfish. Then, the next thing to do is to think of your own body and see that it is strong and healthy. It is the best instrument you have. Think of it as being as strong as adamant, and that with the help of this body, you will cross the ocean of life. Freedom is never to be reached by the weak. Throw away all weakness. Tell your body that it is strong. Tell your mind that it is strong. And have unbounded faith and hope in yourself. Chapter 3. Prana. Pranayama is not, as many think, something about the breath. Breath, indeed, has very little to do with it, if anything. Breathing is only one of the many exercises through which we get to the real pranayama. Pranayama means the control of prana. According to the philosophers of India, the whole universe is composed of two materials, one of which they call akasha. It is the omnipresent, all-penetrating existence. Everything that has form, everything that is the result of compounds, is evolved out of this akasha. It is the akasha that becomes the air, that becomes the liquids, that becomes the solids. It is the akasha that becomes the plants, every form that we see, everything that can be sensed, everything that exists. It itself cannot be perceived. It is so subtle that it is beyond all ordinary perception. It can only be seen when it has become gross, has taken form. At the beginning of creation, there is only this akasha. At the end of the cycle, the solids, the liquids, and the gases all melt into the akasha again, and the next creation similarly proceeds out of this akasha. By what power is the akasha manifested into the universe? By the power of prana. Just as akasha is the infinite omnipresent material of the universe, so is this prana the infinite, omnipresent manifesting power of this universe. At the beginning and at the end of a cycle, everything becomes akasha, and all the forces that are in the universe resolve back into the prana. In the next cycle, out of this prana is evolved everything that we call energy, everything that we call force. It is the prana that is manifesting as motion. It is the prana that is manifesting as gravitation, as magnetism. It is the prana that is manifesting as the actions of the body, as the nerve currents, as thought force, from thought down to the lowest physical force. Everything is but the manifestation of prana. The sum total of all forces in the universe, mental or physical, when resolved back into its original state, is called prana. When there was neither ought nor not, when darkness was covering darkness, what existed then? That akasha existed without motion. This physical motion of prana was stopped, but it existed all the same. All the energies that are now displayed in the universe, we know by modern science, are unchangeable. The sum total of the energies in the universe remains the same throughout. Only at the end of a cycle, these energies quiet down, become potential, and at the beginning of the next cycle, they start up, strike upon the Akasha, and out of the Akasha evolve into various forms. And as the Akasha changes, this prana changes also into all these manifestations of energy. The knowledge and control of this prana is really what is meant by pranayama. This opens to us the door to almost unlimited power. Suppose, for instance, one understood the prana perfectly and could control it. What power on earth could there be that would not be his? He would be able to move the sun and stars out of their places, to control everything in the universe, from the atoms to the biggest suns, because he would control the prana. This is the end and aim of pranayama. When the yogi becomes perfect, there will be nothing in nature not under his control. If he orders the gods to come, they will come at his bidding. If he asks the departed to come, they will come at his bidding. All the forces of nature will obey him as his slaves. And when the ignorant see the powers of these yogis, they call them miracles. One peculiarity of the Hindu mind is that it always inquires for the last possible generalization, leaving the details to be worked out afterwards. The question is raised in the Vedas: what is that knowing which we shall know everything? Thus all books and all philosophies that have been written have been only to prove that by knowing which everything is known. If a man wants to know this universe bit by bit, he must know every individual grain, and that means infinite time for him. He cannot know all of them. Then how can knowledge be? How is it possible for a man to be all-knowing through particulars? The yogis say that behind this particular manifestation, there is a generalization. Behind all particular ideas stand a generalized and abstract principle. Grasp it, and you have grasped everything. Just as this whole universe has been generalized in the Vedas into that one absolute existence. He who has grasped that existence has grasped the whole universe. So all forces have been generalized into this prana, and he who has grasped the prana has grasped all the forces of the universe, mental or physical. He who has controlled the prana has controlled his own mind and all the minds that exist. He who has controlled prana has controlled his body and all the bodies that exist, because the prana is the generalized manifestation of force. How to control the prana is the one idea of pranayama. All of these trainings and exercises are for that one end, and each man must begin where he stands, must learn how to control the things that are nearest to him. This body is the nearest thing to us, nearer than anything in the universe, and this mind is the nearest of all. The prana, which is working this mind and body, is the nearest to us of all the prana in the universe. This little wave of prana, which represents our own energies, mental and physical, is the nearest wave to us of all that infinite ocean of prana. And if we can succeed in controlling that little wave, then alone we can hope to control the whole of prana. Perfection is to be gained by the yogi who has done this, and no power is any more his master. He has become almost almighty, almost all-knowing. We see sections in every country who have attempted this control of prana, In this country, there are mind healers, faith healers, spiritualists, Christian scientists, hypnotists, etc. And if we analyze these different groups, we shall find that the background of each is this control of the prana, whether they know it or not. If you boil all their theories down, the residuum will be the same. It is the one and the same force they are manipulating, only unknowingly. They have stumbled on the discovery of a force and do not know its nature, but they are unconsciously using the same powers which the yogi uses, and which comes from prana. This prana is the vital force in every being, and the finest and highest action of prana is thought. This thought, again, as we see, is not all. There is also a sort of thought which we call instinct or unconscious thought, the lowest plane of action. If a mosquito stings us without thinking, our hand will strike it automatically, instinctively. This is one expression of thought. All reflex actions of the body belong to this plane of thought. There is then a still higher plane of thought, the conscious. I reason, I judge, I think, I see the pros and cons of certain things. Yet that is not all. We know that reason is limited. There is only a certain extent to which reason can go. Beyond this, it cannot reach. The circle within which it runs is very, very limited indeed. Yet at the same time, we find facts rush into this circle. Like the coming of comets, certain things are coming into the circle, and it is certain they come from outside the limit, although our reason cannot go beyond. The causes of the phenomena protruding themselves in this small limit are outside of this limit. The reason and the intellect cannot reach them. But, says the yogi, that is not all. The mind can exist on a still higher plane, the super-consciousness. When the mind has attained to the state, which is called samadhi, perfect concentration, super-consciousness, it goes beyond the limit of reason and comes face to face with facts, which no instinct or reason can ever know. All these manipulations of subtle forces of the body, the different manifestations of prana, if trained, give a push to the mind, and the mind goes up higher and becomes super conscious, and from that plane it acts. In this universe, there is one continuous mass on every plane of existence. Physically, this universe is one. There is no difference between the sun and you. The scientists will tell you it is only a fiction to say the contrary. There is no real evidence between the table and me. The table is one point in the mass of matter, and I another point. Each form represents, as it were, one whirlpool in the infinite ocean of matter, and these are not constant. Just as in a rushing stream, there may be millions of whirlpools, and the water in each of these whirlpools is fresh every moment, turning round and round for a few seconds, and then passing out to the other end. So this whole universe is one constant changing mass of matter, in which we are little whirlpools. A mass of matter enters them, goes round and turns, for a few years, into the body of a man, becomes changed, and gets whirled out into the form of maybe an animal. From that, it rushes round to get, after a few years, into another whirlpool, called a lump of mineral. It is a constant change. Not one body is constant. There is no such thing as my body or your body, except in words. It is one huge mass of matter. One point is called moon, another sun. another a man, another the earth, another a plant, another a mineral. Not one is constant, but everything is changing. Matter eternally concreting and disintegrating. So it is with the mind. Matter is represented by the ether. When the action of prana is most subtle, this very ether, in the finer state of vibration, will represent the mind, and there it will be still one unbroken mass. If you get to simply that subtle vibration, you will see and feel the whole universe is composed of these subtle vibrations. Sometimes certain drugs have the power to take us, as it were, through our senses and bring us to that condition. Many of us may remember the celebrated experiment of Sir Humphrey Davy, when the laughing gas overpowered him, and during the lecture he remained motionless, stupefied, and after that he said the whole universe was made up of ideas. For the time being, as it were, the gross vibrations had ceased, and only the subtle vibrations, which he called the mind, were present to him. He could only see the subtle vibrations around him. Everything had become thought. The whole universe was an ocean of thought. He and everyone else had become little thought whirlpools. Thus, even in the universe of thought, we find this unity, and at last, we get to the self. We know that the self can only be one. Beyond motion, there is but one. Even in manifest motion, there is only a unity. These facts can no more be denied, as modern science has demonstrated them. Modern physics also has demonstrated that the sum total of the energies is the same throughout. It has also been proved that this sum total of energy exists in two forms. It becomes potential, toned down, and calmed, and next it comes out manifested as all these various forces. Again, it goes back to the quiet state, and again it manifests. Thus, it goes on evolving and involving through eternity. The control of this prana, as before stated, is what is called pranayama. This pranayama has very little to do with breathing, except as exercise. The most obvious manifestation of this prana in the human body is the motion of the lungs. If that stops, the body will stop. All other manifestations of force in the body will immediately stop if this is stopped. There are persons who can train themselves in such a manner that the body will live on even when this motion has stopped. There are some persons who can bury themselves for months and yet live without breathing. But for all ordinary persons, this is the principal gross motion in the body. To reach the more subtle, we must take the help of the grosser, and so slowly travel towards the most subtle until we gain our point. The most obvious of all motions in the body is the motion of the lungs, the flywheel which is setting all the other forces in motion. Pranayama really means controlling this motion of the lungs, and this motion is associated with breath. Not that breath is producing it. On the contrary, it is producing breath. The motion draws the air by pump action. The prana is moving the lungs, and the motion of the lungs draws in the air. So pranayama is not breathing, but controlling the muscular power which moves the lungs. And that muscular power, which is going out through the nerves to the muscles, from them to the lungs, makes them move in a certain manner in the prana, which we have to control in the practice of pranayama. When this prana has become controlled, then we shall immediately find that all other actions of the prana in the body will slowly come under control. I myself have seen men who have controlled almost every muscle of the body. And why not? If I have control over certain muscles, why not over every muscle and every nerve of the body? What impossibility is there? At present, the control is lost, and the motion has become automatic. We cannot move the ears at will, but we know that animals can. We have not that power because we do not exercise it. This is what is called atavism. Again, we know that motion, which has become latest, can be brought back to manifestation. By hard work and practice, certain motions of the body, which are most dormant, can be brought back under perfect control. Reasoning in that way, we find there is no impossibility, but on the other hand, every probability that every part of the body can be brought under perfect control. This the yogi does through pranayama. Perhaps some of you have read these books that in pranayama, when drawing in the breath, you must fill your whole body with prana. In the English translation, prana is given as breath, and you are inclined to ask how that is to be done. The fault is with the translator. Every part of the body can be filled with prana, this vital force, and when you are able to do that, you can control the whole body. All the sickness and misery felt in the body will be perfectly controlled. And not only so, you will be able to control another's body. Everything is infectious. Everything is infectious in this world, good or bad. If your body be in a certain state of tension, it will have a tendency to produce the same tension in others. If you are strong and healthy, those that live near you will also have the tendency to become strong and healthy. But if you are sick and weak, those around you will have the tendency to become the same. This vibration will be, as it were, conveyed to another body. In the case of one man trying to heal another, the first idea is simply transferring his own health to the other. This is a primitive sort of healing. Consciously or unconsciously, health can be transmitted. The very strong man, living with the weak man, will make him a little stronger, whether he knows it or not. When consciously done, it becomes quicker and better in its action. Next comes those cases in which a man may not be very healthy himself, yet we know that he can bring health to others. The first man, in such a case, has a little more control over the prana and can rouse, for the time being, his prana, as it were, to a certain state of vibration and transmit it to another person. There have been cases where this process has been carried on at a distance, but in reality, there is no distance in the sense of a break. Where is the distance that has a break? Is there any break between you and the sun? It is a continuous mass of matter. The sun, the one part, and you, the other. Is there a break between one part of a river and another? Then why cannot any force travel? There is no reason against it. These cases are perfectly true, and this prana can be transmitted to a very great distance. But to one genuine case, there are hundreds of frauds. It is not as easy as it is thought to be. In the most ordinary cases of this healing, you will find that these healers are simply taking advantage of the natural healing state of the human body. There is no disease in this world which kills the majority of persons attacked. Even in cholera epidemics, if for a few days 60% die, after that the rate comes down to 30 and 20% and the rest recover. An allopath comes and treats cholera patients, and gives him his medicines. The homeopath comes and gives his medicine and cures perhaps more, simply because the homeopath did not disturb the patients, but allowed nature to deal with them. And the faith healer will cure more still, because he will bring the strength of his mind to bear and rouse through faith the dormant prana of the patient. But there is a mistake constantly made by faith healers. They think that it is the faith itself that directly heals a man. It alone would not cover all the ground. There are diseases where the worst symptoms are that the patient never thinks he has the disease. The tremendous faith of the patient is itself one system of the disease, and usually indicates that he will die quickly. In such cases, the principle that faith cures does not apply. If it were faith the cure in all these cases, those patients would be cured. It is by this prana that real curing comes. The pure man, who has controlled this prana, has the power of bringing it into a certain state of vibration, which can be conveyed to others, arousing in them a similar vibration. You see that in everyday actions. I am talking to you. What am I trying to do? I am, so to say, bringing my mind to a certain state of vibration, and the more I succeed in bringing it to that state, the more you will be affected by what I say. All of you know that the day I am more enthusiastic, the more you enjoy the lecture, and when I am less enthusiastic, you feel less interested. The gigantic willpower of the world movers, can bring their prana into a higher state of vibration, and it is so great and powerful that it catches others in a moment, and thousands are drawn towards them, and half the world thinks as they do. Great prophets of the world had the most wonderful control of this prana, which gave them tremendous willpower. They had brought their prana to the highest state of motion, and this is what gave them their power to sway the world. All manifestations of power arise from this control. Men may not know the secret, but this is the one explanation. Sometimes in your own body, the supply of prana gravitates more or less to one part. The balance is disturbed, and when the balance of the prana is disturbed, what we call disease is produced. To take away the superfluous prana, or to supply the prana that is wanting, will be curing the disease. That again is pranayama, to learn when there is more or less prana in one part of the body than there should be. The feelings will become so subtle that the mind will feel that there is less prana in the toes or the fingers than there should be, and possess the power to supply it. These are among the various functions of pranayama. They have to be learned slowly and gradually, and as you see, the whole scope of Raja Yoga is really to teach the control and direction in different planes of prana. When a man has concentrated his energies, he masters the prana that is in the body. When a man is meditating, he is also concentrating the prana. In an ocean, there are huge waves, like mountains, then smaller waves, and still smaller, down to little bubbles. But the background of all these is the infinite ocean. The bubble is connected with the infinite ocean at one end, and the huge wave at the other end. So one may be a gigantic man, and another a little bubble, but each is connected with the infinite ocean of energy, and this is the common birthright of every animal that exists. Wherever there is life, the storehouse of infinite energy is behind it, starting from some fungus, some very minute microscopic bubble, and at all the time drawing from the infinite storehouse of energy. The form is changed slowly and slowly until in course of time it becomes a plant, then an animal, then a man, and ultimately God. This is attained through millions of aeons. But what is time? An increase of speed, an increase of struggle is able to bridge the distance of time. That which naturally takes a long time to accomplish can be shortened by the intensity of the action, says the yogi. A man may go on slowly drawing in this energy from the infinite mass that exists in the universe, and perhaps he will require 100,000 years to become a deva, and then perhaps 500,000 years to become still higher, and perhaps 5 million of years to become perfect. Given rapid growth, the time will be lessened. Why is it not possible with sufficient effort to reach this very perfection in 6 months or 6 years? There is no limit. Reason shows that if an engine with a certain amount of coal runs at 2 miles an hour, add more coal and it will run in quicker time. Similarly, why shall not the soul, by intensifying its action, attain to that goal in this very life? All beings will at last attain to that perfection we know. But who cares to wait all those millions of aeons? Why not reach it immediately, in this body even, in this human form? Why shall I not get that infinite knowledge, infinite power, now? That is the ideal of the yogi. The whole science of yoga is directed to that one end, to teach men how to shorten the time by adding power, how to intensify the power of assimilation, and thereby shortening the time for reaching perfection, instead of slowly advancing from point to point and waiting until the whole human race has come out and become perfect. All the great prophets, saints, and seers of the world, what are they? In that one span of life, they lived the whole life of humanity, bridged the whole length of time that it will take ordinary humanity to come to the state of perfection. In this life, they perfect themselves. They have no thought for anything else. Breathe for nothing else. Never live a moment for any other idea. And thus, the way is shortened for them. This is what is meant by concentration, intensifying the action or assimilation, and thus shortening the time. And Raja Yoga is a science which teaches us how to gain the power of concentration. What has this pranayama got to do with spiritualism? This is also a manifestation of pranayama. If it is to be true that the departed spirits exist, only that we cannot see them, it is quite probable that there may be hundreds and millions living here that we can neither see, feel, nor touch. We may be continually passing and repassing through their bodies, and it is also probable that they do not see us or feel us. It is a circle within a circle, universe within universe. Those only that are on the same plane see each other. We have 5 senses, and we represent prana in a certain state of vibration. All beings in the same state of vibration will see each other, but if there are beings who represent prana in a higher state of vibration, they will not be seen. We may increase the intensity of light until we cannot see the light at all, but there may be beings with eyes so powerful that they can see such light. Again, if the vibrations are very low, we do not see light, but there are animals that see it, as cats and owls. Our range of vision is only one plane of the vibrations of this prana. Take this atmosphere, for instance. It is piled up layer on layer, but the layers nearer to the earth are denser than those above, and as you go higher, the atmosphere becomes finer and finer. Or to take the case of the ocean, as you go deeper and deeper, the density of the water increases, and those animals that live at the bottom of the sea can never come up, or they will be broken into pieces. Think of this whole universe as an ocean of ether in vibration under the action of prana, and that it consists of layer after layer of varying degrees of vibration. In the more external, the vibrations are less, and nearer to the center, the vibrations become quicker and quicker, and each range of vibration makes one plane. Think of the whole thing as one circle, the center of which is perfection. The further you get from the center, the slower the vibrations. Matter is the outermost crust. Next comes mind, and spirit is the center. Then, suppose these ranges of vision are cut into planes. So many millions of miles is one set of vibrations. And then so many millions of miles, still higher, and so on. It is perfectly certain that those who live on the plane of a certain state of vibration will have the power of recognizing each other, but will not recognize those above or below them. Yet just as by the telescope and the microscope, we can increase the scope of our vision and make higher or lower vibrations cognizable to us. Similarly, every man can bring himself to the state of vibration belonging to the next plane, thus enabling himself to see what is going on there. Suppose this room were full of beings who we do not see. They represent certain vibrations in the prana, and we represent other vibrations. Suppose they represent the quicker, and we the slower. Prana is the material of which they are composed. All are part of the same ocean of prana, only the rate of vibration differs. If I can bring myself to the quicker vibration, this plane will immediately change for me. I shall not see you anymore. You vanish, and they appear. Some of you, perhaps, know this to be true. All this bringing of the mind into a higher state of vibration is included in one word in yoga, samadhi. All these states of higher vibration, superconscious vibrations of the mind, are grouped in that one word, samadhi, and the lower states of samadhi give us visions of these beings. The highest grade of samadhi is when we see the real thing, when we see the material out of which the whole of these grades of beings are composed, and the lump of clay being known. We know all the clay in the universe. Thus, we see that this pranayama includes all that is true of spiritualism even. Similarly, you will find that wherever any sect or body of people is trying to search out anything occult and mystical or hidden, it is really this yoga, this attempt to control the prana. You will find that wherever there is an extraordinary display of power, it is the manifestation of this prana. Even the physical sciences can be included also in pranayama. What moves the steam engine? Prana acting through the steam. What are all these phenomena of electricity and so forth but prana? What is physical science? Pranayama by external means. Prana, manifesting itself as mental power, can only be controlled by mental means. That part of the pranayama which attempts to control the physical manifestations of the prana by physical means is called physical science, and the part which tries to control the manifestations of prana as mental force by mental means is called Raja Yoga. Chapter 4. The Psychic Prana. According to the yogis, there are two nerve currents in the spinal column called Pingala and Ida, and there is a hollow canal called Sushumna running through the spinal cord. At the lower end of the hollow canal is what the yogis call the lotus of the Kundalini. They describe it as triangular in form. In the symbolic language of the yogis, there is a power called the Kundalini coiled up. When that Kundalini awakes, it tries to force a passage through the hollow canal, and as it raises step by step, as it were, layer after layer of the mind becomes open. All these different visions and wonderful powers come to the yogi. When it reaches the brain, the yogi is perfectly detached from the body and mind, and the soul finds itself free. We know that the spinal cord is composed in a peculiar manner. If we take the figure 8 horizontally, there are 2 parts, and these 2 parts are connected in the middle. Suppose you add 8 after 8, piled on top of the other. That will represent the spinal cord. The left is Ida and the right the Pingala, and the hollow canal which runs through the center of the spinal cord is the Sushumna. When the spinal cord ends in some of the lumbar vertebrae, a fine fiber comes down, and the canal is even in that fiber, only much finer. The canal is closed at the lower end, which is situated near what is called the sacral plexus, which according to modern physiology is triangular in form. The different plexuses that have their centers in the spinal cord can very well stand for the different lotuses of the yogi. The yogi conceives of several centers, beginning with the Muladhara, the basic, and ending with the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus in the brain. So if we take these different plexuses as representing these circles, the idea of the yogi can be understood very easily in the language of modern physiology. We know there are 2 sorts of actions in the nerve currents, one afferent and the other efferent, one sensory and the other motor, one centripetal and the other centrifugal. One carries the sensations to the brain, and the other from the brain to the outer body. These vibrations are all connected with the brain in the long run. Several other facts we have to remember in order to clean the way for the explanation which is to come. The spinal cord at the brain ends in a sort of bulb in the medulla, which is not attached to the bone, but floats in the fluid in the brain, so that if there were a blow on the head, the force of the blow will be dissipated in the fluid and will not hurt the bulb. This will be an important fact as we go on. Secondly, we also have to know that of all the centers, we have particularly to remember 3: the Muladhara, the basis, the Hasrahara, the 1,000-petaled lotus of the brain, and the Svadhisthana, next above the Muladhara. Next, we will take one fact from physics. We all hear of electricity and various other forms connected with it. What electricity is, no one knows, but so far as it is known, it is a sort of motion. There are various other motions in the universe. What is the difference between them and electricity? Suppose this table moves, that the molecules which compose this table are moving in different directions. If they are all made to move in the same direction, it will be electricity. Electric motion is when the molecules all move in the same direction. If all air molecules in a room are made to move in the same direction, it will make a gigantic battery of electricity of the room. Another point from physiology we must remember that the center which regulates the respiratory system, the breathing system, has a sort of controlling action over the system of nerve currents, and the controlling center of the respiratory system is opposite the thorax in the spinal column. This center regulates the respiratory organs and also exercises some control over the secondary centers. Now, we shall see why breathing is practiced. In the first place, From rhythmical breathing will come a tendency of all the molecules in the body to have the same direction. When mind changes into will, the current changes into a motion similar to electricity, because the nerves have been proved to show polarity under action of current elements. This shows that when the will evolves into the nerve currents, it is changed into something like electricity. When all the motion of the body has become perfectly rhythmical, the body has, as it were, become a gigantic battery of will. This tremendous will is exactly what the yogi wants. This is therefore a physiological explanation of the breathing exercise. It tends to bring a rhythmic action in the body and helps us, through the respiratory center, to control the other centers. The aim of pranayama here is to rouse the coiled up power in the Muladhara, called the Kundalini. Everything that we see, or imagine, or dream, we have to perceive in space. This is the ordinary space, called the Mahakasha, or great space. When a yogi reads the thoughts of other men, or perceives supersensuous objects, he sees them in another sort of space called the Chittakasa, the mental space. When perception has become objectless and the soul shines in its own nature, it is called the Chittakasa, or knowledge space. When the Kundalini is aroused and enters the canal of the Sushumna, all the perceptions are in the mental space. When it has reached the end of the canal, which opens out into the brain, the objectless perception is in the knowledge space. Taking the analogy of electricity, we find that men can send a current along a wire, but nature requires no wires to send her tremendous currents. This proves that the wire is not really necessary, but that only our inability to dispense with it compels us to use it. Similarly, all the sensations and motions of the body are being sent into the brain and sent out of it through these wires of nerve fibers. The columns of sensory and motor fibers in the spinal cord are the Ida and Pingala of the yogis. They are the main channels through which the afferent and efferent currents are traveling. But why should not the mind send the news without any wire, or react without any wires? We see that this is being done in nature. The yogi says, if you can do that, you have got rid of the bondage of matter. How to do it? If you can make the current pass through the Sushumna, the canal in the middle of the spinal column, you have solved the problem. The mind has made this network of the nervous system and has to break it so that no wires will be required to work through. Then alone will all knowledge come to us. No more bondage of body. This is why it is so important that you should get control of the Sushumna. If you can send the mental current through the hollow canal without any nerve fibers to act as wires, the yogi says you have solved the problem, and also says it can be done. This Sushumna is, in ordinary persons, closed up at the lower extremity. No action comes through it. The yogi proposes a practice by which it can be opened and the nerve currents made to travel through. When a sensation is carried to a center, the center reacts. This reaction in the case of automatic centers is followed by motion. In the case of conscious centers, it is followed first by perception and secondly by motion. All perception is the reaction to action from outside. How then do perceptions in dreams arise? There is then no action from outside. The sensory motions, therefore, are coiled up somewhere, just as the motor motions are known to be in different centers. For instance, I see a city. The perception of that city was from the reaction to the sensations brought from outside objects compromising that city. That is to say, a certain motion in the brain molecules has been set up by the motion in the in-carrying nerves, which again were set in motion by external objects in the city. Now, even after a long time, I can remember the city. This memory is exactly the same phenomena, only it is in a milder form. But whence is the action that set up even the milder form of similar vibrations in the brain? Not certainly from the primary sensations. Therefore, it must be that the sensations are coiled up somewhere, and they, by their acting, bring out the mild reaction which we call dream perception. Now the center where all these residual sensations are, as it were, stored up, is called the Muladhara. The root receptacle and the coiled up energy of action is Kundalini, the coiled up. It is very probable that the residual motor energy is also stored up in the same center as after deep study or meditation on external objects, the part of the body where Muladhara center is situated, probably the sacral plexus, gets heated. Now, if this coiled up energy be roused and made active, and then consciously made to travel up the Sushumna canal, a tremendous reaction will set in. When a minute portion of this energy of action travels along a nerve fiber and causes reaction from centers, the perception is either dream or imagination. But the vast mass of this energy stored up by the power of long internal meditation travels along the Sushumna and strikes the centers. The reaction is tremendous, immensely superior to the reaction of dream or imagination, immensely more intense than the reaction of sense perception. It is supersensuous perception, and the mind in that state is called superconsciousness. And when it reaches the metropolis of all sensations, the brain, the whole brain as it were, reacts, and every perceiving molecule in the body, as it were, reacts, and the result is the full blaze of illumination, the perception of the self. As this Kundalini force travels from center to center, layer after layer of the mind, as it were, will be opened up, and this universe will be perceived by the yogi in its fine or coarse form. Then alone, the causes of this universe, both as sensation and reaction, will be known as they are, and hence will come all knowledge. The causes being known, the knowledge of the effect is sure to follow. Thus, the rousing of the Kundalini is the one and only way to attain divine wisdom and superconscious perception, the realization of the spirit. It may come in various ways, through the love for God, through the mercy of perfected sages, or through the power of the analytical will of the philosopher. Wherever there is a manifestation of what is ordinarily called supernatural power or wisdom, there must have been a little current of Kundalini which found its way into the Sushumna. Only in the vast majority of such cases of supernaturalism, they had ignorantly stumbled onto some practice which set free a minute portion of the coiled up Kundalini. All worship, consciously or unconsciously, led to this end. The man who thinks that he is receiving responses to his prayers does not know that the fulfillment came only from his own nature, that he has succeeded by the mental attitude of prayer in waking up a bit of the infinite power which is coiled up within himself. Whom thus men ignorantly worship under various names, through fear and tribulation, the yogi declares to the world to be the real power coiled up in every being, the mother of eternal happiness, if we know how to approach her. And Raja Yoga is the science of religion, the rational of all worship. all prayers, forms, ceremonies, and miracles. Chapter 5. The Control of Psychic Prana. We have now to deal with the exercises in pranayama. We have seen the first step will be, according to the yogis, to control the motion of the lungs. What we want to do is to feel the finer motions that are going on in the body. Our mind has become externalized and have lost sight of the finer motions inside. If we can begin to feel them, we can begin to control them. These nerve currents are going on all over the body, bringing life and vitality to every muscle, but we do not feel them. The yogi says we can learn to do so. How? By taking up and controlling all those motions of the prana, beginning with the motion of the lungs. And when we have done that for a sufficient length of time, we shall also be able to control the finer motions. We now come to the exercises in pranayama. Sit upright. The body must be kept straight. The spinal cord, although it is inside the vertebral column, is not attached to it. If you sit crookedly, you disturb the spinal cord, so let it be free. Any time that you sit crookedly and try to meditate, you are doing yourself an injury. The three parts of the body must always be held straight: the chest, the neck, and the head in one line. You will find that by a little practice, this will come to you just as breathing. The second thing is to get control of the nerves. We have seen that the nerve center that controls the respiratory organs has a sort of controlling effect on the nerves, and rhythmical breathing is therefore necessary. The breathing that we generally use should not be called breathing at all. It is very irregular. Then, there are some natural differences of breathing between men and women. The first lesson is to breathe in a measured way, in and out. This will harmonize the system. When you have practiced this for some time, you will do well to join the repetition of some word to it, as Om, or any other word, and let the word flow in and out with the breath rhythmically, harmoniously, and you will feel the whole body is becoming rhythmical. Then you will learn what rest is. Sleep is not rest, comparatively. Once this rest has come, the most tired nerves will be calmed down, and you will find that you have never really rested. In India, we use certain symbolical words, instead 1, 2, 3, 4. This is why I advise you to join the mental repetition of the Om, or other sacred words to the pranayama. The first effect of this practice will be that the face will change. Harsh lines will disappear. With this calm though, calmness will come over the face. Next, beautiful voice will come. I never saw a yogi with a croaking voice. These sighs will come after a few months practiced. After practicing this first breathing for a few days, you take up a higher one, slowly filling the lungs with breath through the ida, the left nostril, and at the same time, concentrating the mind on the nerve current. You are, as it were, sending the nerve current down the spinal column and striking violently on the last plexus, the basic lotus, which is triangular in form, the seat of the kundalini. Then hold the current there for some time. Imagine that you are slowly drawing that nerve current with the breath through the other side, then slowly throwing it out through the right nostril. This you will find a little difficulty to practice. The easiest way is to stop the right nostril with the thumb and then slowly draw in the breath through the left. Then close both nostrils with the thumb and forefinger and imagine that you are sending the current down and striking the base of the sushumna. Then take the thumb off and let the breath out through the right nostril. Next, Inhale slowly through that nostril, keeping the other closed by the forefinger. Then close both as before. The way the Hindus practice this would be very difficult for this country because they do it from their childhood and their lungs are prepared for it. Here, it is well to begin with 4 seconds and slowly increase. Draw in 4 seconds, hold in 16 seconds, then throw it out in 8 seconds. This makes 1 pranayama. At the same time, think of the triangle. Concentrate the mind on that center. The imagination can help you a great deal. The next breathing is slowly drawing the breath in and then immediately out slowly. Then stopping the breathing out, using the same numbers. The only difference is that the first case, the breath was held in, and in the second, held out. The last is the easier one. The breathing in which you hold the breath in the lungs must not be practiced too much. Do it only 4 times in the morning and 4 times in the evening. Then you can slowly increase the time and number. You will find that you have the power to do so, and that you take pleasure in it. So very carefully and cautiously increase as you feel that you have the power to 6 instead of 4. It may injure you if you practice it irregularly. Of the 3 processes, the purification of the nerves, the retaining of the breath inside, and keeping the breath outside, the first and the last are neither difficult nor dangerous. The more you practice the first one, the calmer you will be. Just think of Om, and you can practice even while you are sitting at your work. You will be all the better for it. One day, if you practice hard, the Kundalini will be aroused. For those who practice once or twice a day, just a little calmness of the body and mind will come, and beautiful voice. Only for those who can go on further with it will this Kundalini be aroused, and the whole of nature will begin to change, and the book of knowledge will be open. No more will you need to go to books for knowledge. Your own mind will have become your book, containing infinite knowledge. I have already spoken of the Ida and Pingala currents flowing through either side of the spinal column, also of the Sushumna, the passage through the center of the spinal cord. These 3 are present in every animal. Whatever has a spinal column has these 3 lines of action. But the yogis claim that in the ordinary mankind, the Sushumna is closed. That action there is not evident, while in the other 2 it is evident, carrying power to different parts of the body. The yogi alone has the Sushumna open. When this Sushumna current opens, and thought begins to rise through it, we get beyond the senses. Our minds become super sensuous, super conscious. We get beyond even the intellect, and where reasoning cannot reach. To open that Sushumna is the prime object of the yogi. According to him, along this Sushumna are ranged these centers of distribution, or in more figurative language, these lotuses, as they are called. The lowest one is the lowest end of the spinal cord, and it is called Muladhara. The next one is the sacral plexus, and the next, the Minapura, and the next, the Anahata, and the next, Visuddha, and next, Ajna, and the last, which is the brain. In the Sahasrahara, or the 1,000-petaled, of these we have to take cognition just now of only 2 centers, the lowest, the Muladhara, and the highest, the Sahasrahara. The lowest one is where all energy becomes stored up, and that energy has to be taken up from there and brought to the last one, the brain. The yogis claim that of all energies, the human body comprises the highest in what they call ojas. Now this ojas is stored up in the brain, and the more ojas is in a man's head, the more powerful he is. The more intellectual, the more spiritually strong will that man be. This is the action of ojas. One man may speak beautiful language and beautiful thoughts, but they do not impress people. Another man speaks neither beautiful language nor beautiful thoughts, yet his words charm. This is the power of ojas coming out. Every movement coming from him will be powerful. Now in all mankind, there is more or less of this ojas stored up, and all the forces that are working in the body in their highest form become ojas. You must remember that it is only a question of transformation. The same force which is working outside as electricity or magnetism will become changed into inner force. The same forces that are working as muscular energy will be changed into ojas. The yogis say that the part of the human energy which is expressed as sexual energy in sexual functions, sexual thought, and so on, when checked and controlled, easily become changed into ojas. And as this, the lowest center is the one which guides all these functions. Therefore, the yogi pays particular attention to that center. He tries to take up all the sexual energy and convert it into ojas. It is only the chaste man or woman who can make the ojas rise and become stored in the brain. And that is why chastity has always been considered the highest virtue, because man feels that if he is unchaste, spirituality goes away. He loses mental vigor and strong moral stamina. This is why in all of the religious orders in the world, there have produced spiritual giants. You will always find the intense chastity insisted upon. That is why the monks came into existence giving up marriage. There must be perfect chastity in thought, word, and deed. Without it, the practice of Raja Yoga is dangerous and may lead to insanity. If people practice Raja Yoga and at the same time lead an impure life, how can they expect to become yogis? Pratyahara and Dharana. The next step is called Pratyahara. What is this? You know how perceptions come? First of all, there are the external instruments, then the internal organs, acting in the body through the brain centers, and there is the mind. When these come together and attach themselves to some external thing, then we perceive that thing. At the same time, it is a very difficult thing to concentrate the mind and attach it to one organ only. The mind is a slave. We hear "be good" and "be good" and "be good" taught all over the world. There is hardly a child born in any country in the world who has not been told, "do not steal, do not tell a lie," but nobody tells the child how he can help it. Talking will never do it. Why should he not become a thief? We do not teach him how not to steal. We simply tell him, "do not steal." Only when we teach him to control his mind do we really help him. All actions, internal and external, occur when the mind joins itself to certain centers, which centers are called the organs. Willingly or unwillingly, it is drawn to join itself to the centers, and that is why people do foolish deeds and feel misery, which, if the mind were under control, they would not. What would be the result of controlling the mind? It then would not join itself to the centers of perception, and naturally, feeling and willingly would be under control. It is clear so far. Is it possible? It is perfectly possible. You see it in modern times. The faith healers teach people to deny misery and pain and evil. Their philosophy is rather, roundabout, but it is part of yoga into which they have somehow stumbled. In those cases where they succeed in making a person throw off suffering by denying everything, they have really taught a part of Pratyahara, as they have made the mind of the person strong enough to refuse to take up the record of the senses. The hypnotist, in a similar manner, by their suggestion, excites in the patient a sort of morbid pratyahara for the time being. The so-called hypnotic suggestion can only act upon a diseased body and a clouded mind, and until the operator, by means of a fixed gaze or otherwise, has succeeded in putting the mind of the subject in a sort of passive, morbid condition, his suggestions never work. Now, the control of the centers which is established in hypnotic patient or the patient of faith healing for a time is utterly reprehensible because it leads to ultimate ruin. It is not really controlling the brain centers by the power of one's own will, but is, as it were, stunning the patient's mind for a time by sudden blows which another's will delivers to it. It is not checking by means of reins and muscular strength, but rather by asking another to deliver heavy blows on the head of the horses to stun them for a time into gentleness. At each one of these processes, the man operated upon loses a part of his mental energies, and at last, the mind, instead of gaining power of perfect control, becomes a shapeless, powerless mass, and the only goal of the patient is the lunatic asylum. Every attempt at control, which is not voluntary, not with the controller's own mind, is not only disastrous, but it defeats the end. The goal of each soul is freedom, mastery, freedom from slavery of matter and thought, mastery of external and internal nature. Instead of leading towards that, every will current from another, in whatever form it comes to men, either as direct control of my organs, or as forcing me to control them while under a morbid condition, only rivets one link more to the already existing heavy chain of bondage of past thoughts, past superstition. Therefore, beware how you allow yourselves to be acted upon by others. Beware how you unknowingly lead another to ruin. True, some succeed in doing good to many for a time, by giving a new trend to their propensities, but at the same time, they bring ruin to millions by the unconscious hypnotic suggestions they throw around, rousing in men and women the morbid passive hypnotic condition, which makes them almost soulless at last. Whosoever therefore asks anyone to believe blindly, or drags mankind behind them through controlling it by his superior will, is an injurer to humanity, though he may not have intended it. Therefore, use your own minds, control body and mind yourselves. Remember that until you are a diseased person, no extraneous will can work upon you. And avoid everyone, however great and good he may be, who asks you to blindly believe. All over the world, there have been dancing and jumping and howling groups who spread like infections when they begin to sing and dance and preach. They also come under this heading. They exercise a singular control for the time being over sensitive persons, alas, often in the long run to degenerate whole races. It is healthier for the individual or the race to remain wicked than to be apparently good by such morbid, extraneous control. One's heart sinks to think of the amount of injury done to humanity by such irresponsible, yet meaningful religious fanatics. They little know that the mind which attains to sudden spiritual upheaval under their suggestions, with music and prayer, are simply making themselves passive, morbid, and powerless, and opening themselves to any other suggestion. But it is ever so evil. Little do these ignorant, deluded persons dream that whilst they are congratulating themselves upon the miraculous power to transform human hearts, which power they think was poured upon them by some being above the cloud, they are sowing the seed of some future decay, of crime, of lunacy, and of death. Therefore, beware of everything that takes away your freedom. Know that it is dangerous, and avoid it by all means in your power. He who has succeeded in attaining or detaching his mind to or from the centers at will has succeeded in Pratyahara, which means gathering towards, checking the outgoing power of the mind, freeing it from the thraldom of the senses. When we can do this, we really possess a character. Then alone shall we have made a long step towards freedom. Before that, we are mere machines. How hard is it to control the mind? Well, has it been compared to the maddened monkey? There was a monkey, restless by his own nature, and all monkeys are, as if they were not enough. Someone made him drink freely of wine, so that he became still more restless. Then a scorpion stung him. When a man is stung by a scorpion, he jumps about for a whole day. So the poor monkey found his condition worse than ever. To complete his misery, a demon entered into him. What language can describe the uncontrollable restlessness of that monkey? The human mind is like that monkey, incessantly active by its own nature. Then it becomes drunk with the wine of desire, thus increasing its turbulence. After desire takes possession, comes the sting of the scorpion of jealousy of others whose desires meet fulfillment. And the last of all, the demon of pride takes possession of the mind, making it think itself of all importance. How hard to control such a mind. The first lesson then is to sit from time to time and let the mind run on. The mind is bubbling up all the time. It is like that monkey jumping about. Let the monkey jump as much as he can. You simply wait and watch. Knowledge is power, says the proverb, and that is true. Until you know what the mind is doing, you cannot control it. Give it the full length of the reins. Many most hideous thoughts may come into it. You will be astonished that it was possible for you to think such things. But you will find that each day the mind's vagaries are becoming less and less violent, that each day it becomes calmer. In the first few months, you will find that the mind will have 1,000 thoughts. Later, you will find that it is toned down to perhaps 700, and after a few more months, it will have fewer and fewer, until at last, it will be under perfect control. But we must patiently practice every day. As soon as the stream is turned on, the engine must run, and as soon as things are before us, we must perceive. So a man, to prove that he is not a machine, must demonstrate that he is under the control of nothing. This controlling of the mind and not allowing it to join itself to the centers is Pratyahara. How is this practiced? It is long work, not to be done in a day. Only after a patient, continuous struggle for years can we succeed. The next lesson depends on this. After you have practiced a Pratyahara for a time, take the next step, the Dharana, holding the mind to certain points. What is meant by holding the mind to certain points? Forcing the mind to feel certain parts of the body to the exclusion of others. For instance, try to feel only the hand, to the exclusion of other parts of the body. When the chitta, or mind stuff, is confined and limited to a certain place, this is called dharana. This dharana is of various sorts, and along with it, it is better to have a little play of the imagination. For instance, the mind should be made to think of one point in the heart. This is very difficult. An easier way is to imagine a lotus there. That lotus is full of light, effulgent light. Put the mind there, or think of the lotus in the brain as full of light, or of the different centers of the Sushumna mentioned before. The yogi must always practice. He should try to live alone. The companionship of different sorts of people distracts his mind. He should not speak much, because to speak distracts the mind, nor work much, because too much work distracts the mind. The mind cannot be controlled after a whole day's hard work. One with such determination becomes a yogi. Such is the power of good that even the least done will bring a great amount of benefit. It will not hurt anyone, but will benefit everyone. First of all, it will tone down nervous excitement, bring calmness, enable us to see things more clearly. The temperament will be better, and the health will be better. Sound health will be one of the first signs, and a beautiful voice. Defects in the voice will be changed. This will be among the first of many effects that will come. Those who practice hard will get many other signs. Sometimes there will be sounds as a peal of bells heard at a distance, commingling and falling on the ear as one continuous sound. Sometimes things will be seen, little specks of light floating and becoming bigger and bigger. And when these things come, know that you are progressing very fast. Those who want to be yogis and practice very hard must take a little care for their diet at first. Those who want to make very rapid progress, if they can live on milk alone for some months and cereals, will find it an advantage. But for those who want only a little practice for everyday business sort of life, let them not eat too much, but otherwise they may eat whatever they please. For those who want to make faster progress and to practice hard, a strict diet is absolutely necessary. As the organization becomes finer and finer, at first you will find that the least things throw you out of balance. One bit of food more or less will disturb the whole system, and then you will be able to eat whatever you like. You will find that whenever you are beginning to concentrate, the dropping of a pin will seem like a thunderbolt going through your brain. The organs get finer and perceptions get finer. These are the stages through which we have to pass, and all those who persevere will succeed. Give up all argumentation and other distractions. Is there anything in this dry intellectual jargon? It only throws the mind off its balance and disturbs it. These things have to be realized. Will talking do that? So give up all the vain talk. Read only those books which have been written by persons who have had realization. Be like the pearl oyster. There is a pretty Indian fable to the effect that if it rains, when the star Svatvi is in the ascendant, and a drop of rain falls into an oyster, that drop will become a pearl. The oyster knows this, so they come to the surface when the stars shine, and wait to catch the precious raindrop. When one falls into the shell, quickly the oyster closes it, and dives down to the bottom of the sea, there to patiently develop the drop into the pearl. We should be like that. First hear, then understand, and then leave all distractions. Shut our minds to outside influences, and devote ourselves to developing the truth within us. There is the danger of frittering away our energies by taking up an idea for its novelty and then giving it up for another that is newer. Take one thing up and do it, and see the end of it. And before you have seen the end, do not give it up. He who can become mad upon one idea, he alone will see the light. Those that only take a nibble here and there will never attain anything. They may titillate their nerves for a moment, but there it will end. They will be slaves in the hands of nature. and will never get beyond the senses. Those who really want to be yogis must give up once for all this nibbling at things. Take up one idea. Make that one idea your life. Dream of it. Think of it. Live on that idea. Let the brain, the body, muscles, nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea, and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success, and this is the way great spiritual giants are produced. Others are mere talking machines. If we really want to be blessed and make others blessed, we must go deeper. And for the first step, do not disturb the mind, and do not associate with persons whose ideas are disturbing. All of you know that certain persons, certain places, certain foods repel you. Avoid them. And those who want to go to the highest must avoid all company, good or bad. Practice hard. Whether you live or die, it does not matter. You have to plunge in and work without thinking of the result. If you are brave enough, in 6 months, you will be a perfect yogi. But for others, those who take up just a bit of it, a little of everything, they get no higher. It is of no use to simply take a course of lessons. Those who are full of tamas, ignorant and dull, those whose minds never get fixed on any idea, who only crave for something to entertain them. Religion and philosophy are simply entertainments to them. They come to religion as to entertainment and get that little bit of entertainment. These are the unpreserving. They hear a talk, think it very nice, and then go home and forget all about it. To succeed, you must have tremendous perseverance, tremendous will. I will drink the ocean, says the preserving soul. At my will, mountains will crumble. Have that sort of energy, that sort of will. Work hard, and you will reach the goal. Chapter 7. Dhyana and Samadhi. We have finished a cursory review of different steps in Raja Yoga, except for the finer ones. The training in concentration, which is the aim, the goal, to which Raja Yoga will lead us. We see as human beings that all our knowledge, which is called rational, is referred to consciousness. I am conscious of this table. I am conscious of your presence, and so forth. That makes me know that you are here, and that the table is here, and things I see, feel, and adhere are here. At the same time, there is a very great part of my existence of which I am not conscious. All the different organs inside the body, the different parts of the brain itself. Nobody is conscious of these things. When I eat food, I do it consciously. When I assimilate it, I do it unconsciously. When the food is manufactured into blood, it is done unconsciously. When out of the blood all the different parts of my body are made, it is done unconsciously. It is I who am doing this. There cannot be 20 people in one body. How do I know that I do it and nobody else? It may be urged that my business is only in eating the food and assimilating the food, and that manufacturing the body out of food is done for me by someone else. That cannot be, because it can be demonstrated that almost every action of which we are unconscious now can be again brought up to the plane of consciousness. The heart is beating apparently without our control. None of us here can control the heart. It goes on its own way, but by practice, men can bring even the heart under control until it will just beat at will, slowly or quickly or almost stop. Nearly every part of the body can be brought under control. What does this show? That these things which are beneath consciousness are only worked by us. Only we are doing it unconsciously. We have then 2 planes in which the human mind is working. First is the conscious plane. That is to say, that sort of work which is always accompanied with the feeling of egoism. That part of mind which is unaccompanied with feeling of egoism is unconscious work, and that part which is accompanied with the feeling of egoism is conscious work. In the lower animals, this unconscious work is called instinct. In higher animals, and in the highest of man, the second part, that which is accompanied with the feeling of egoism, prevails and is called conscious work. But it does not end there. There is still a higher plane which the mind can work. It can go beyond consciousness. Just as unconscious work is beneath consciousness, so is there another work which is above consciousness, and which also is not accompanied with the feeling of egoism. The feeling of egoism is only on the middle plane. When the mind is above or below that line, there is no feeling of I, and yet the mind works. When the mind goes beyond this line of self-consciousness, it is called samadhi, or super-consciousness. It is above consciousness. How, for instance, do we know that a man in samadhi has not gone below his consciousness, has not degenerated instead of going higher? In both cases, the works are unaccompanied by egoism. The answer is, by the effects, by the result of the work, we know that which is below and that which is above. When a man goes into deep sleep, he enters a plane beneath consciousness. He works the body all the time. He breathes, he moves the body, perhaps in his sleep, without any accompanying feeling of ego. He is unconscious, and when he returns from his sleep, he is the same man who went into it. The sum total of the knowledge which he had before he went into sleep remains the same. It is not increased at all. No enlightenment has come, but if a man goes into samadhi, if he goes into it a fool, he comes out a sage. What makes the difference? From one state, a man comes out the very same man that went in, and out of another state, the man becomes enlightened, a sage, a prophet, a saint. His whole character changed, his life changed, illumined. These are the two effects. Now the effects being different, the cause must be different. As this illumination with which a man comes back from samadhi is much higher than can be got from unconsciousness, or much higher than can be got by reasoning in a conscious state, it must therefore be superconsciousness, and samadhi is called the superconsciousness state. This, in short, is the idea of samadhi. What is the application? The application is here. The field of reason, or of the conscious workings of the mind, is narrow and limited. There is a little circle within which human reason will have to move. It cannot go beyond it. Every attempt to go beyond is impossible. Yet it is beyond this circle of reason that lies all that humanity holds most dear. All these questions, whether there is an immortal soul, whether there is a God, whether there is a supreme intelligence guiding this universe, or beyond the field of reason. Reason can never answer these questions. What does reason say? It says, I am agnostic. I do not know either yea or nay. Yet these questions are important to us. Without a proper answer to them, human life will be impossible. All our ethical theories, all our moral attitudes, all this good and great in human nature has been molded upon by answers that have come from beyond that circle. It is very important, therefore, that we should have answers to these questions. Without such answers, human life will be impossible. If life is only a 5-minute thing, if the universe is only a fortuitous combination of atoms, then why should I do good to another? Why should there be mercy, justice, or fellow feelings? The best thing for this world would be to make hay while the sun shines, each man for himself. If there is no hope, why should I love my brother and not cut his throat? If there is nothing beyond, if there is no freedom, but only rigorous dead laws, I should only try to make myself happy here. You will find people saying nowadays that they have utilitarian grounds as the basis of all morality. What is this basis? Procuring the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest number? Why should I do this? Why should I not produce the greatest unhappiness to the greatest number if that serves my purpose? How will utilitarians answer this question? How do you know what is right or what is wrong? I am impelled by my desire for happiness, and I fulfill it, and it is in my nature. I know nothing beyond. I have these desires and must fulfill them. Why should you complain? Whence come all these truths about human life, about morality, about the immortal soul, about God, about love and sympathy, about being good, and above all, about being unselfish? All ethics, all human action, and all human thought hang upon this idea of unselfishness. The whole idea of human life can be put into one word: unselfishness. Why should we be unselfish? Where is the necessity, the force, the power of my being unselfish? Why should I be? You call yourself a rational man, a utilitarian, but if you do not show me a reason, I say you are irrational. Show me the reason why I should not be selfish, why I should not be like a brute, acting without reason. It may be good as poetry, but poetry is not reason. Show me a reason. Why shall I be unselfish, and why be good? Because Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so says so does not weigh with me. Where is the utility of my being unselfish? My utility is to be selfish. If utility means the greatest amount of happiness, I may get the greatest amount of happiness by cheating and robbing others. What is the answer? The utilitarian can never give it. The answer is that this world is only one drop in an infinite ocean, one link in an infinite chain. Where did those that preached unselfishness and taught it to the human race get this idea? We know it is not instinctive. The animals which have instinct do not know it. Neither is it reason. Reason does not know anything about these ideas. Whence did they come? We find in study one fact held in common by all the great teachers of religion the world ever had. They all claim to have got these truths from beyond. Only many of them did not know where they were getting it from. For instance, one would say that an angel came down in the form of a human being with wings and said to him, "Here, O man, this is the message." Another says that a deva, a bright being, appeared to him. Another says he dreamed that his ancestors came and told him all these things. He did not know anything beyond that, but this thing is common, and all claim that all claim either that they saw angels or heard the voice of God or saw some wonderful vision. All claim that this knowledge came to them from beyond, not through their reasoning power. Why? What does the science of yoga teach? It teaches that they were right in claiming that this knowledge came to them from beyond reasoning, but that it came from within themselves. The yogi teaches that the mind itself has a higher state of existence, beyond reason, a superconscious state. And when the mind gets to that higher state, then this knowledge, beyond reasoning, comes to man, metaphysical knowledge, beyond all physical knowledge. Metaphysical and transcendental knowledge comes to that man, and this state of going beyond reason, transcending ordinary human nature, sometimes may come by chance to a man who does not understand its science. He, as it were, stumbles into it. He generally interprets it as from outside. So this explains why inspiration or this transcendental knowledge may be the same in different countries, but in one country it will seem to come through an angel, and another through a deva, and another through God. What does it mean? It means that the mind brought the knowledge by its own nature, and that the finding of the knowledge was interpreted according to the beliefs and educations of the person through whom it came. The real fact, it means that the mind brought the knowledge by its own nature, and that the finding of the knowledge was interpreted according to the beliefs and education of the person through whom it came. The real fact is that these various men, as it were, stumbled into this superconscious state. The yogi says there is a great danger in stumbling into this state. In a good many cases, there is a danger of the brain being destroyed, and as a rule, you will find that all those men who, however great they were, who have stumbled into the superconscious state without understanding it, grope in the dark, and generally have, along with their knowledge, some quaint superstition. They open themselves to hallucination. Muhammad claimed that the angel Gabriel came to him in a cave one day and took him on the heavenly horse, Harak. He visited the heavens. But with all that, Muhammad spoke some wonderful truths. If you read the Quran, you find the most wonderful truths mixed with these superstitions. How will you explain it? The man was inspired, no doubt, but that inspiration was, as it were, stumbled upon. He was not a trained yogi and did not know the reason of what he was doing. Think of the good Muhammad did to the world, and think of the great evil that has been done through his fanaticism. Think of the millions massacred through his teachings, mothers bereft of their children, children made orphans, whole countries destroyed, millions upon millions of people killed. So we see in studying the lives of all these great teachers that there was this danger, yet we find at the same time that they were all inspired. Somehow or other they got into the superconscious state. Only whenever a prophet got into the state by simply force of emotion, just by heightening his emotional nature, he brought away from the state some truths, but also some fanaticism, some superstition which injured the world as much as the greatness of the teachings did good. To get any reason out of this mass of incongruity we call human life, we have to transcend our reason, but we must do it scientifically, slowly, by regular practice, and we must cast off all superstition. We must take it up just like any other science. Reason we must have to lay our foundation. We must follow reason as far as it leads, and when reason fails, reason itself will show us the way to the highest plane. So whenever we hear a man say, "I am inspired," and then talk the most irrational nonsense, simply reject it. Why? Because of these three states of the mind: instinct, reason, and superconsciousness, or the unconscious, conscious, and superconscious states, belong to one of the same mind. There are not three minds in one man, but one develops into the other. Instinct develops into reason, and reason into the transcendental consciousness. Therefore, one never contradicts the other. So whenever you meet with the wild statement which contradicts human reason and common sense, reject them without any fear, because the real inspiration will never contradict, but will fulfill. Just as you find the greatest prophet saying, "I come not to destroy, but to fulfill," so this inspiration always comes to fulfill reason, and is in direct harmony with reason. And whenever it contradicts reason, you must know that it is not inspiration. All the different steps in yoga are intended to bring us scientifically to the superconscious state, or samadhi. Furthermore, this is a most vital point to understand, that inspiration is as much in every man's nature as it is away in the ancient prophets. These prophets were not unique. They were just the same as you or I. They were great yogis. They had gained this super consciousness, and you and I can get the same. They were not particular people. The very fact that one man ever reached that state will prove that it is possible for every man to do so. Not only is it possible, but every man must eventually get to that state, and that is religion. Experience is the only teacher we have. We may talk and reason all our lives without ever understanding a word of truth until we experience it ourselves. You cannot hope to make a man a surgeon by simply giving him a few bucks. You cannot satisfy my curiosity to see a country by showing me a map. I must have actual experience. Maps can only create a little curiosity in us to get more perfect knowledge. Beyond that, they have no value whatsoever. All clinging to books only degenerates the human mind. Was there ever a more horrible blasphemy than to say that all knowledge of God is confined in this or that book? How dare men call God infinite, and yet to compress him into the covers of a little book? Millions of people have been killed because they did not believe what the books say, because they would not see all the knowledge of God within the covers of a book. Of course, this killing and murdering has gone by, but the world is still tremendously bound up by a belief in books. In order to reach the superconscious state in a scientific manner, we have to pass through these various steps that I have been teaching you in Raja Yoga. After Pratyahara and Dharana, which I taught you in the last lecture, we come to Dhyana meditation, when the mind has become trained to remain fixed on a certain internal or external location. There comes to it the power of, as it were, flowing in an unbroken current towards that point. This state is called dhyana. When this power of dhyana has been so much intensified as to be able to reject the external part of perception and remain meditating only on the internal part, that state is called samadhi. The three, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, together are called samyama. This is, if the mind can first concentrate upon an object, and then is able to continue in that concentration for a length of time, and then, by continued concentration, to dwell only on the internal part of the perception of which the object was the effect. Everything comes under the control of such a mind. This meditative state is the highest state of existence. So long as there is a desire, no real happiness can come. It is only the contemplative, witness-like study of objects that brings us to real enjoyment and happiness. The animal has its happiness in the senses, the man in his intellect, and the God in spiritual contemplation. It is only to the soul that has attained to this contemplative state that the world has really become beautiful. To him who desires nothing and does not mix himself up with them, the manifold changes of nature are one panorama of beauty and sublimity. These ideas have to be understood in dhyana or meditation. First, there is external vibration. Second, the nerve motion that carries it to the mind. Third, the reaction from the mind, along with which flashes the knowledge of the object, which was the external cause of these different changes, from ethereal vibrations to the mental reaction. These three are called in yoga sabda, which is sound, artha, meaning, and jnana, knowledge. In the language of physiology, they are called the ethereal vibration, the motion in the nerve and brain, and the mental reaction. Now these, through distinct processes, have become mixed up in such a fashion as to be quite indistinct. In fact, we cannot perceive any of these causes. We only perceive the effects of these three, which effect we call the external object. Every act of perception includes these three, and there is no reason why we should not be able to distinguish between them. When, by the previous preparations, the mind becomes strong and controlled, the power of finer perception has been attained, and then the mind should be employed in meditation. This meditation must begin with gross objects and slowly rise to finer, then to finer and finer, until it has become objectless. The mind should first be employed in perceiving the external causes of sensations, then the internal motions, and then the reactions of the mind. When it has succeeded in perceiving the external causes of sensations, by themselves it will acquire the power of perceiving all fine material existence, all fine bodies and forms. When it can succeed in perceiving the motions inside by themselves, it will gain the control of all mental waves, in itself or in others, even before they have translated themselves into physical forces. And when he will be able to perceive the mental reaction by itself, the yogi will acquire the knowledge of everything, as every sensible object and every thought is the result of this reaction. Then will he have seen, as it were, the very foundations of his mind, and it will be under his perfect control. Different powers will come to the yogi, and if he yields to the temptations of any one of these, the road to his further progress will be barred. Such is the evil of running after enjoyments. But if he is strong enough to reject even these miraculous powers, he will attain the goal of yoga, the complete suppression of the waves in the ocean of the mind. Then the glory of the soul, untrammeled by the distractions of the mind or the motion of his body, will shine in its full effulgence, and the yogi will find himself as he is, and he always was, the essence of knowledge, the immortal, all-pervading. Samadhi is the property of every human being, nay, every animal, from the lowest animal to the highest angelic being. Some time or other, each one will have to come to that state, and then alone will religion begin for him. In all this time, what are we doing? We are only struggling toward that stage where there is no difference between us and those who have no religion, because we've had no experience. What is concentration good for, save to bring us to this existence? Each one of the steps to attain this samadhi has been reasoned out, properly adjusted, scientifically organized, and when faithfully practiced, will surely lead us to the desired end. Then will all sorrows cease, all miseries, the seeds of actions will be burned, and the soul will be forever free. Chapter 8. Raja Yoga in Belief. This is the summary of Raja Yoga, translated from the Kurma Purana. The fire of yoga burns the cage of sin that is around a man. Knowledge becomes purified, and nirvana is directly obtained. From yoga comes knowledge. Knowledge again helps the yogi. He who is compound of both yoga and knowledge, with him the Lord is pleased. Those that practice Mahayoga either once a day or twice a day or thrice or always know them to be gods. Yoga is divided into two parts. One is called the Abhava and the other Mahayoga, where oneself is meditated on a zero and bereft of quality. That is called Abhava. The yogi, by each one, realizes his self. That in which one sees the self as full of bliss and bereft of all impurities, and one with God, is called Mahayoga. The other yogas that we read or heard of do not deserve one particle of the great Brahma Yoga, in which the yogi finds himself and the whole universe as God himself. This is the highest of all yogas. These are the steps in Raja Yoga: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, of which no injuring anybody, truthfulness, non-covetousness, chastity, not receiving anything from another, are called yama. It purifies the mind, the chitta. by thought, word, and deed, always and in every living being. Not producing pain is what's called ahimsa, non-injuring. There is no virtue higher than this non-injuring. There is no happiness higher than what a man obtains by the attitude of non-offensiveness to all creation. By truth, we attain to work. Through truth, everything is attained. In truth, everything is established. Relating facts as they are, this is truth. Not taking others' goods by stealth or by force is called asteyam, non-covetousness. Chastity in thought, word, and deed, always, and in all conditions, is what is called brahmacharya. Not receiving any present from anybody, even when one is suffering terribly, is what is called aprahagriha. When a man receives a gift from another man, the theory is that his heart becomes impure, he becomes low, he loses his independence, he becomes bound and attached. The following are helps to success in yoga. Niyama, regular habits and observances. Tapas, austerity. Sradhaya, study. Santela, contentment. Sucham, purity. Isvara pranidhana, worshipping God. Fasting, or in other ways controlling the body, is called the physical tapas. Repeating the Vedas and other mantras by which the subtle material in the body is purified is called sradhaya. There are three sorts of repetitions of these mantras. One is called the verbal, another semi-verbal, and the third mental. The verbal or audible is the lowest, and the inaudible is the highest of all. The repetition, which is so loud that anybody can hear it, is the verbal. The next one is where only the organs begin to vibrate, but no sound is heard. Another man sitting next cannot hear what is being said. That in which there is no sound, only mental repetition of the mantra, at the same time thinking its meaning, is called the mental muttering, and is the highest. The sages have said that there are two sorts of purification, external and internal. The purification of the body is by water, earth, or other materials. The external purification, as by bathing, etc. Purification of the mind by truth, and by all other virtues, is what is called internal purification. Both are necessary. It is not sufficient that a man should be internally pure and externally dirty. When both are not attainable, the internal purity is the better, but no one will be a yogi until he has both. Worship is by praise, by memory, by having devotion to God. We have spoken about yama and niyama. Next comes pranayama. Prana, the vital forces in one's own body. Yama means controlling them. There are three sorts of pranayama, the very simple, the middle, and the very high. The whole of pranayama is divided into two parts. One is called filling, and the other is called emptying. When you begin with 12 seconds, it is the lowest pranayama. When you begin with 24 seconds, it is the middle pranayama. That pranayama is the best, which begins with 36 seconds. The pranayama in which there is first perspiration, then vibration of the body, and then rising from the seat and joining of the man's soul with great bliss, is the very highest pranayama. There is mantram called Gayatri. It is a very holy verse of the Vedas. We meditate only the glory of that being who has produced this universe. May he enlighten our minds. Then Om is joined to it at the beginning and end. In one pranayama repeat, 3 Gayatris. In all books they speak of pranayama being divided into Richaka, rejection of exhaling, Puraka, inhaling, and Kumbhaka, restraining stationary. The Indras, the organs of the senses, are acting outwards and coming in contact with external objects. Bringing them under the control of the will is what is called Pratyahara. Gathering towards oneself is the literal translation. Fixing the mind on the lotus of the heart, or the center of the head, is what is called Dharana. When remaining in one place, making one place as the base, where the waves of the mind rise up without being touched by the other waves. When all other waves have stopped, and only one wave rises in the mind. That is called Dhyana, meditation. When no basis is necessary, when the whole of the mind has become one wave, one formedness, it is called Samadhi. Bereft of all help from places and centers, only the meaning of things is present. If the mind can be fixed on one center for 12 seconds, it will be Dharana. 12 such Dharanas will be a Dhyana, and 12 such Dhyanas will be Samadhi. The next is asana. The only thing to understand is to hold the body straight, leaving the body free with the chest, shoulders, and head straight. Where there is fire, or in water, or on ground which is strewn with dry leaves, or where there are wild animals, where four streets meet, or where there is too much noise, or too much fear, or too many anthills, where there are many wicked persons, yoga must not be practiced in such places. This applies more particularly in India. When the body feels very lazy, do not practice, or when the mind is very miserable and sorrowful, or when the body is ill. Go to a place which is well hidden, and where people do not come to disturb you. As soon as you do not want people to know what you are doing, all the curiosity in the world will be awakened. But if you go in the street and want people to know what you are doing, they will not care. Do not choose dirty places, rather choose beautiful scenery, or a room in your own house which is beautiful. When you practice, first salute the ancient yogis, and your own guru, and God, and then begin. Dhyana is spoken of, and a few examples are given of what to meditate upon. Sit straight and look at the tip of your nose. Later on, we will come to know how that concentrates the mind, how by controlling the two optic nerves, one advances a long way toward the control of the arc of reaction, and so the control of the will. These are the few specimens of meditation. Imagine a lotus upon the top of the head, several inches up, and virtue as its center, the stalk as knowledge. The 8 petals of the lotus are the 8 powers of the yogi. Inside, the stamens and pistils are renunciation. If the yogi refuses the external powers, he will come to salvation. So the 8 petals of the lotus are the 8 powers, but the internal stamens and pistils are the external renunciation, the renunciation of all these. Inside the lotus, think of the golden one, the almighty, the intangible, he whose name is Om, the inexpressible, surrounded with effulgent light. Meditate on that. Another meditation is given. Think of a space in your head, and in the midst of that space, think a flame is burning. Think of that flame as your own soul. Inside that flame is another space, effulgent, and this is the soul of your soul. God. Meditate upon that in the heart. Chastity, non-injuring, pardoning everyone, even the greatest enemy. Truth, faith in the Lord. These are all different vrittis. Be not afraid if you are not perfect in all of these. Work, and the others will come. He who has whole soul has gone unto the Lord. He who has taken refuge in the Lord. He whose heart has become purified. With whatsoever desire he comes to the Lord, he will grant that to him. Therefore, worship him through knowledge, or worship him through love, or worship him through renunciation. He is my beloved worshipper. He is my beloved Bhakta, who is not jealous of any being, who is the friend of all, who is merciful to all, who has nothing of his own, whose egotism is lost, who is always satisfied, he who works always in yoga. whose self has become controlled, whose will is firm, whose mind and whose intelligence are given up unto me, know that he is my beloved Bhakta, from whom comes no disturbance, who never becomes the cause of disturbance to others. He who has given up excessive joy, grief, and fear and anxiety. Such a one is my beloved. He who does not depend on anything, pure, active, giving up all. He who does not care whether good comes or evil, never becomes miserable. He who is the same in praise or in blame, with the silent, thoughtful end, blessed with what little comes his way. Homeless, he who has no home, the whole world is his home. Steady is his ideas. Such as one becomes a yogi. There was a great god sage called Narada. Just as there are sages among mankind, so there are great yogis among the gods. Narada was a good yogi and very great. He traveled everywhere, and one day he was passing through a forest, and he saw a man who had been meditating until the white ants had built a huge mound round his body. He had been sitting in this position long. He said to Narada, "Where are you going?" Narada replied, "I am going to heaven." "Then ask God when he will be merciful to me, when I will attain freedom." Further on, Narada saw another man. He was jumping about, singing, dancing, and said, "Oh Narada, where are you going?" His voice and his gestures were wild. Narada said, "I am going to heaven. Then ask when I will be free." So Narada went on. In the course of time, he came again by the same road, and there was a man who had been meditating till the anthills had grown round him. He said, "Oh Narada, did you ask the Lord about me?" "Oh yes." "What did he say?" "The Lord told me that you would attain freedom in 4 more births." Then the man began to weep and wail and said, "I have meditated until an anthill has been raised around me, and I have 4 more births yet?" Narada went to the other man. "Did you ask my question?" "Oh yes." "Do you see that tamarind tree? I have to tell you that as many leaves as there are on that tree, so many times will you be born, and then you will attain freedom." The man began to dance for joy and said, "I will have freedom after such a short time?" A voice came, "My child, you will have freedom this minute." That was the reward for his perseverance. He was ready to work through all those births. Nothing discouraged him, but the first man felt that even 4 more births must be too long. Only perseverance, like that of the man who was willing to wait aeons, will bring about the highest result. Like, comment, and subscribe.